So this is the first item of general business, just approval of the minutes. Are there any comments, changes to the minutes from anyone on the panel?
We're into the meeting now, because I'm showing the meeting.
No? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes and a seconder, please?
This is George. I would move.
Okay, George.
Peter, second.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, review of the day's agenda. Any declarations? I'll do that first. Any conflicts of interest from anyone today? None? Okay.
Paul,
Yes, hello?
Paul, this is Claude. I will only attend the Rees Park presentation today,
Rees Park. Okay, thank you.
which starts at 11, correct?
Yep. Okay, a review of day's agenda. As you know, we just have the two items. One item was dropped, but I believe we're still going to have our in-camera session, and we'll skip lunch and discuss the item right after the Rees Street Park. So, Chris, do you have any report or comments that you want to share with the panel on last month's projects?
Yeah, I've got just a quick update. Go ahead, Leon. Did you flip it back? Seems to be. There we go.
Yep.
So Queens Quay East. Right now, they are planning to come back for schematic design in October, and hopefully they will be able to do that. Next slide, please. The West Onlands blocks 3, 4, and 7. We gave this project a vote of full support at the last review, which was actually their final stage. So we're not expecting them to return to the panel, and they're off on their merry way. 60 Trinity Street. This is the gas pumping station with the brick screen. I'm happy to say that I think they've tried to take the comments on board on this, and even though we gave them a vote of non-support, and they have not typically been an organization that comes to design review, they are planning to come back in November with some revisions. So I think we can feel like good about that. They may not quite as robust as we would like, but personally I find it gratifying that they're listening and they're going to return. So hopefully we'll see something that we like a bit better. Next slide, please. The connectivity study, the pedestrian connectivity study, they are having a final meeting with their technical advisory committee, and they're planning to finish this study up in November, and they're not planning to come back to the panel. But you know, I think this is a first step in a series of steps to try and address the issue of these underpasses. So hopefully it at least sets enough of a framework that we can continue to push for what we think we need. Next slide, please. So these are just some construction photos. This is Portland's flood protection. These are the bridge abutments for the new Cherry Street Bridge. I think we showed you pictures of the bridge under construction last month, and this is where the bridge will land across the Keating Channel. Next slide, please. And this is the first section of the project where we have fully excavated for the new river channel, and I think you can see the beginnings of a river channel at the bottom of the picture. I think that's just rainwater, but you get a sense of the scale of the excavation that's happened here, and they're moving across the site, so it hasn't all been. I think we're at about 40% excavation, but this is the first section where it's been dug down fully to its final depth. This is the stormwater management facility building. This was designed by Pat Hansen, who I think is on the call. Construction's at 85%. There was some dissatisfaction with the quality of the poured concrete. The building's been sandblasted, and I have to confess I haven't actually heard if Pat's happy with how that turned out or not. Do you want to tell us, Pat, or do you want to talk about it with you later?
No, I think it's improved the surface, the appearance of the building. considerably. So yeah, we've approved it and we're pretty happy with it.
Good. It's looking pretty great. The landscape work is on schedule, and the approach is to kind of build this almost plinth that it's going to sit on and connect up to the stormwater shaft. So it's quite powerful when you're out there. We did a site visit a couple months ago, and I guess completion's anticipated by the end of the year. Lakeshore Public Realm. This is something the panel had encouraged us to do, which was to try some pilots. So we're doing our first little pilot project here, and we're testing out some permeable pavers. I guess we're calling them hydro pavers. And this is almost done. It's a fairly small area at a corner, but I think it's actually pretty exciting that we're getting this done. And Sonia Vangeli on my team has been really driving this hard, because it's never easy to do a pilot project. It takes a lot of work, but she's actually made it happen. So we're contemplating doing some more of these, some more quick start projects, and maybe some more pilots as we move forward. So maybe we'll do a site visit to this with you guys when it's all done and has been in service for a little bit and the weather's nice. Okay, next slide, please. So this is our upcoming agenda for next month as it stands right now. So we're hoping to bring the destination play back. We are hopefully bringing the PIC core, and the PIC is, I never remember what it stands for, but this is, the shorthand is the film studio area in the Portlands. There's the draft urban design guidelines for that. That actually is an area that is really being led by the city and by Create TO, not by Waterfront Toronto, but the guidelines are coming here. 178, 180 Queens Quay East. West Donlands Block 10, which is the Anishinaabe project that we were talking about, is coming back for detailed design again. And Queens Quay East road schematic design coming back. And if one of those drops off, we've got a wait list of the Lakeshore Public Realm East wants to come back, and the Lower Young Public Realm. So I think we'll have a full agenda next month, but we shall see.
Chris, just a comment on Block 10. We had indicated that we may want to make sure we allocate enough time to have that item considered, and it appears right now it would be, part of a fairly long list. That might suggest November meeting might be more appropriate for that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we should probably give them more time. Were we planning to give them more time, Leon? I can't remember now.
I believe that was the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely give them more time.
Just a thought
Yeah.
to think as you finalize the agenda.
Okay.
The other thing, Chris, I believe you wanted to make note that Jana was hired for the PLFP
Oh, yes.
Parks Pavilion.
Right. That's right. So the Destination Playground project is going to include a pavilion, sort of, food / kind of informal classroom space for school groups. And we did an RFP for that. And actually, I guess Michael Van Valkenburg's office did the RFP to bring them on as a sub. And Jana's firm was hired. So we're very happy about that. And Jana's doing an awesome job doing program studies and starting to make it into architecture now. It's really great.
Great. Okay. Anything else from you, Chris?
No, I think I'm done.
Okay. I just have one comment that I've asked Chris and Leon to look at for the benefit of the panel. If we could put our minds to a schedule for the 2021 meetings, I think it would help everyone to know, are we still meeting on the third Wednesday of every month, or are there any changes, etc. So I would love to see that come forward for the October meeting. Okay, I think that concludes all the items of general business. So we're pretty well right on time, ready to start the first item, West Donlands Block 5, the Rekai Center, schematic design. And I need to remind all the participants that the public session is being recorded and will be posted on the Waterfront Toronto website. So just be aware of that. Leon will also call out when there's a 3-minute time remaining on the design presentation, so try and stay on time. And other than that, I think we're ready to roll. So who is going to, Michael, believe you're going to do the introduction?
So we also have Sue Graham-Nutter, CEO of Rekai Centers, and Robert Davies with Montgomery Sizem here, who will be giving the presentation after my intro. And I believe Megan and Deanne are on the call as well to answer any questions that come up. So just a bit of background, Rekai Centers is a nonprofit charitable corporation. They own and operate 2 other long-term care homes in downtown Toronto. And they've been actively pursuing this site with us and the province for the past 10 years. The development was previously brought to DRP for issues identification in November of 2017. There's been a few changes, the big one being that Options for Homes is no longer involved in the project. So the development doesn't contain the residential condominium portion that had been proposed back in 2017. The proposal now contains 348 long-term care beds, up from the 220 to 264 that was proposed in 2017. And it's received, the new proposal has received endorsements from a number of local resident associations. And in addition, Waterfront Toronto has always felt that this is both an important use and an exciting project for the West Don Lands, and one of the reasons that we've worked so hard with Rekai over the past number of years to make it happen. And in terms of timeline, they've just submitted their preliminary project review to the city, and they're also planning to have their site plan application in fairly soon this fall, with a target construction date of the second quarter of 2021, below grade work beginning at the end of 2021, and above grade work beginning the first quarter of 2022. Just a reminder of where the site is. So it's bordered by Eastern Avenue on the north, in front on the south, with Cherry Street and the 504 streetcar on the eastern edge. And as you can see in this image, the Honda dealership is kind of on the back side of the building. They share a laneway on the western side. And then here's a picture of the existing site looking southeast. And again, this is kind of the same image, but looking northwest. And here's the site boundary with Cherry Street at the bottom of the image. And as you can see, the site boundary includes the laneway on the western side of the building. And then just some additional context, which I'm sure everyone's very familiar with. This has been a number of sites in the near area that have come to the panel recently. But Block 8 came for detailed design in January 2019, Block 10 in February of this year, Blocks 3, 4, and 7 in July, and I think Block 1 as well, actually, in June, I believe, for detailed design. So there's quite a lot of activity in this area. And I'm sure everyone's very familiar with this, but this is the block plan. And then the more detailed look at Block 5, including the frontage zone, the kind of setback requirement, and the building massing on the right there. And then just some high-level zoning context. It's part of the regeneration area in the West Don Lands. It's the Central Waterfront and King of Parliament secondary plan. It's currently a holding zone, as much of the West Don Lands was, but almost all those requirements have been met to be lifted. And the maximum height is just under 30 meters. So as you'll see, the proposal is above that, but fairly in line with most of the other projects that I mentioned on the previous slide a minute ago. Just some additional context on Block 10, which you've seen recently. So what this proposal looks like right now, and it's kind of just to the southeast of Block 5, and Blocks 3, 4, and 7, which are just to the south. And just a reminder, this is a public land project, so it's part of DRP Stream 2. And so it's come to the panel before the SPA submission, and we expect them to come back for detailed design. And here were some of the comments that the panel made in 2017. Just as a reminder, as it's been a couple of years, there was a comment that the intergenerational opportunity for the building and facilities was very important. So to ensure access to George Brown College and the YMCA facilities, to think of the accessible green roof as an important asset and to consider the possibility of stormwater collection. Reminder that the quality of the public realm was critical, and to ensure that design builds on the quality of the existing public realm. The panel also recommended to think about the possibility of minimizing parking. And finally, that the garbage and servicing areas required improvements to avoid feeling like just the backside of the building. And then finally, some areas that we in the city have identified for consideration in terms of the building, with thinking about all 4 active facades, and does the ground floor have strong facing and animating conditions on all sides? And also, does the building itself meet Waterfront Toronto's objective of design excellence, thinking about visual porosity and animation, facade expressions, and the approach to materiality? With the public realm and landscape, again, thinking about the ground floor landscape with all 4 streets, and then as well the upper level landscape, including the terrace and roof decks. And then finally, with respect to sustainability, do the sustainability targets meet Waterfront Toronto's objectives, and has the design team adequately considered key strategies in meeting the targets? With that, I'll hand it over to Sue and Robert.
Can I just jump in for 2 seconds? I just want to put a little extra context around this, which is this project has been underway for I think about 10 years. Is that right, Sue? That's right? And really, I mean, Sue, Graham Nutter, and Meg Davis at Waterfront Toronto have just been like tireless champions of this. It has faced a kind of hard to believe array of challenges given what it is. But thankfully, Sue and Meg really never let go of this vision. So still really happy that this is moving along and that you guys haven't given up. So go ahead.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to hand it over to Peter actually to start the comments. Peter Rekai, the chair of the board of directors.
Hi, everybody, and thank you. Can everybody hear me, see me?
Yep.
The general nodding. Okay. Well, it's a pleasure being back, I should say, in front of this group. We have with us, as you've noted, Sue Graham Nutter, who has indeed toiled relentlessly for, and I think, Chris, you're right, a decade on this. We've been at this for a long time. We have with us as well Afaf Zahir, who's our Director of Strategic Planning at the Rekai Centers. We also have with us Ellie Newman, who is the chair of our board's project committee. I wonder if we could have a slide. The next, there we go. So as you know, we're a nonprofit corporation. We have a volunteer board of directors. We previously had a partnership with Options for Homes. We have now decided to go alone with what essentially is a much, I guess, a bigger, better, and more modern facility, and one that is looking at providing care to almost 350 people. It also is, in our vision, we have also learned from what we've been through under COVID, and I like to think of this as the first post-COVID long-term care home that will be built. So we have taken into consideration a number of the issues that we have faced over the past 6 months or so. One of the issues we're seeing, we know that somewhere between 1,200 and 1,800 long-term care beds are actually going to be leaving downtown Toronto over the next 5 years or so. The Ministry of Long-Term Care has indicated that older homes over 30 years old, and we are one of those, which typically have 4-bed wards, can only now have 2 residents for a 4-bed ward, and this is totally understandable, and it's to help reduce the spread of COVID. What it means practically is that all of these older homes, and there are many of them throughout the city and the province, now have a diminished bed capacity. Ours has gone from 126 at our Rekai Center at Sherbourne down to 88 residents, and this is, as I say, going to be reflected across the city. So what was an urgency before has become even more urgent now. The other issue is that we're less able at this point in time to focus on admissions from the community in general, as it's been decreed that our first priority and the first priority of long-term care homes is to admit alternate care patients, as they're called, from the hospitals first, in order to ensure that the hospitals will be ready for an outbreak should that occur. One of the aspects of what we've learned, and I think Sue will go into this in more detail, is with respect to infection control. We've also looking at our own dialysis center to prevent our residents from having to take almost daily trips in some cases to hospitals, where that is both very dangerous in some cases for them during a pandemic situation, and it's also very difficult for people to get organized and to spend days in hospital dialysis. So these are just some of the innovations. There are many more, and Sue is going to discuss those right now. So thank you very much for allowing me to do this introduction.
Thanks, Peter. Maybe Dustin, you can move back one slide, please. The vision for the Rekai centers has changed with the COVID. We experienced COVID, unfortunately, in both homes. But what we noticed is that the need to have small neighborhoods desperately needed with COVID situation is also aligning perfectly with our vision for Alzheimer's and dementia. So that's been very much influenced and incorporated into our drawings. Dustin, next slide. In terms of infection control, as Peter said, we hope to be one of the first long-term care homes that have really learned from our experience. We'll have 2 negative pressure isolation rooms on floor 7 and 9, which were chosen strategically because of the mechanicals. And we will have a 3rd private room adjacent to those 2 rooms. And we're having centrally piped oxygen in as well, which provides pure oxygen to residents who might need pure oxygen, which we saw during COVID. And we've also even placed the garbage and laundry chutes appropriately to make sure we have the highest level of infection control. Next slide. The dementia and Alzheimer's has always been a key focus of ours, and the Alzheimer's and dementia units will be on the upper floors, 32 beds per resident home area. And the colors, etc., will be working with OCAD, who have registered staff that are masters of color therapy. And we've learned a great deal from them. Next slide. Dustin, the dialysis center. We've been working with St. Mike's with peritoneal dialysis at our Rekai at Sherburne location for 10 years now. They asked us a number of years ago to open up a dialysis center at Cherry. It actually grew. It was originally 6. It's now 9 stations, and there is a growing need in the community. Unfortunately, St. Mike's experienced COVID outbreak themselves in dialysis. And so right in the middle of the outbreak, I was texting the architects and asking to get rid of the curtains and institute walls so we could be the highest level of infection control. Another key area for us is a college for PSWs. You will actually see in the media probably next week that George Brown students are now with us. And this is the first part of our college experience. And we will be launching a college that will help to deal with the PSW shortage in Ontario. And next slide is our Seniors Assessment Center. Anybody who's ever gone into an ER with an aging parent knows you can be there quite a long time. What we're looking at now is an ER focused on the needs of the seniors with the minor issues, the urinary tract infections, pneumonia, slips and falls. Obviously, if it's a heart attack issue, you're at an acute care setting. And we're working with St. Mike's on this as well. Next slide. We've been very fortunate to have letters of support and great support from the community and from Waterfront over our 10-year journey. This is a letter of support from the West Donlands community, and the next one is from the St. Lawrence Neighborhood Association, and you will see that much of their input over the last number of years we've incorporated into the drawings. Over to you, Bob, now.
Thank you, Sue. Good morning, everyone. I'm only here on telephone. I'm having technical issues with Teams. I thought we'd resolve them, but anyway, we haven't. So I'm going to be following along And I also would like to introduce Dustin Hooper, who's the project architect and an associate in our firm. So when you hear, he's much more than just operating the slides for us. So I think I can go through these next slides fairly quickly because Mike and Chris have already gone through these. So the issues identification and the two there, which is the last time you saw this, we were with options for homes, no longer. And then if we go to the next slide, the first image looking down Cherry Street from Eastern. The only thing I'd like to point out here is that the site looks pretty flat, but it actually slopes from the north to the south almost a meter. And if you look on the right side of the image before the Honda dealership, there's a fence line there. And that's really the limit of the property on the west side to which we can build. So the footprint is about 25 meters wide and about 100 meters long that we have to work with. And the next slide is looking up what Mike referred to as a laneway, looking north from Front Street. It's actually an easement that's part of this property. It's not a public lane. And we've been in conversations with the owner of the Honda Acura dealer to resolve how we're going to deal. For the time being, he's using it as his own private parking area and shuttle area, which we're going to have to come to terms with that. The next image is just looking along Front Street, and Cherry is at the signal intersection there. Next slide, which is just showing the transportation routes. It's actually very well located from the point of view of visitors, family members, staff, and students getting to the site. And to the previous comments that we heard about parking, we're only showing 6 parking spaces at grade. There's no underground parking as part of this proposal. And then the next slide is just showing how well it located is. I mean, it's quite remarkable, really, for that 348 residents will be living in this particular part of the city. And if you're familiar with this, I mean, many residents won't get out of the building ever, but they're in a very good location and they'll be able to see the activity and the life that'll be coming increasingly into this part of the world. So we're very excited by the site. The next slide is the zoning envelope, and I think Mike already explained this slide to you as the building context as well. And then the next 2 slides, which are just showing what it will be like in the existing context with the green roofs. And then if we go to slide 26, it's the building massing. And, you know, the first is just the basic mass. The second is the setbacks. The third is that we're creating amenity space on the roof of those volumes, largely because we're able to put the air handling system within the setback in between the 2 major blocks. And then there's a slight inflection in the plan that happens in the volumes to partially break down the mass and also avoid a funny little radius corner that is in the property definition at the southeast corner. So now we're going to look at the building itself, and we're going to look at it in, first from the point of view of the program, and then 2 ideas about what the building can be like. And then we'll go through the floor plans and the renderings. So the long-term care, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, is governed by the province. And there's a set of standards that need to be met, minimum standards that need to be met, and then there's some recommended guidelines that need to be followed. It's different than any other Ministry of Health building type in this, particularly because the people who live aren't referred to as patients, but they're referred to as residents. And the architectural language that's used in design include things like town squares, neighborhoods, spas. The rooms themselves are thought of as small houses that line a street, and the entrance vestibules have a porch-like quality to them. And as much as possible, we try to provide access to daylight and view and easy orientation so that you know your bearings all the time when you're in the building. And the basic unit is what's called a resident home area. And the important thing about a resident home area is that you need to be able to look after all of a resident's needs within the home area. So that's not only their sleeping room, bedrooms, but also their dining and bathing and activity and socializing and medical care. Everything can happen within that resident home area. So in reality, if they can't, they don't need to leave the resident home area to have all their needs met. And the ministry right now has said that the maximum number of people that can live in a resident home area is 32. So in our case here, sorry, someone's trying to call me. In this case, you can see the little axle on the left and the one on the right is just an exploded version of it. The bottom two floors are common amenity spaces, as well as the dialysis clinic and the seniors assessment center. Then we have 5 floors of 2 resident home areas on each floor, each one being 22, so a total of 44 residents on a floor, sharing an elevator lobby access, and then a servery that serves the kitchens for each of them. Then we have the 8th floor, which is amenity and air handling, the mechanical penthouse. Then we have 4 smaller floor plates, which are 32-bed resident home areas that are split into 2 16s, and those will be for primarily people with dementia. And then up in the penthouse, we have more amenity space and the chiller. So the next slide shows that in section. And what's interesting about this is that there's actually, because the site is so small, there's very little access to the outdoors for garden space. So all the amenity is stacked vertically, as this diagram illustrates. So, there's this long, narrow footprint with no access to garden at grade, and all the residents' needs need to be taken care of within the building. So it's inevitable at some point that we start to think of this building as a ship or an ocean liner, where everyone's needs are being cared for within the building itself. So if we go to slide 31, we have a transverse section through the building. Cherry Street on the right, the easement is on the left, and you can see the 2-story gallery colonnade piece that runs north-south along the whole Cherry Street corridor. And then stacking up through the building, there's the elevator lobbies on the right side, the dining room terraces on the left side. The 8th floor is the outdoor terrace, and then the same thing repeats up to the penthouse. If we look at slide 32, it's a similar transverse section, but this time not through the terrace at the 8th floor, but through the interior amenity space. And you can see it's a higher floor to floor there because of the air handling equipment. Then slide 33, we're looking at a longitudinal section, and you can see the 2-story high gallery colonnade space running the length of Cherry Street. This for us is what would normally be a town square. So in a greenfield site, typically in long-term care, we would have usually around a courtyard, but maybe it's even an enclosed courtyard, a very strong sense of a common area, center, town square piece of the building. And in this case, because of the small footprint, it's actually running the length of Cherry Street. So it will both provide a lively place for the residents to occupy, seeing the street life of Cherry Street, and also provide some life from Cherry Street that will reveal the activity of the building. And then slide 34, we're up looking at the 8th floor terrace into the downtown core. And you also notice the glazing, the vertical glazing above the terrace and below it. That's the end of the corridor, the end of the resident home area, sitting areas. And slide 35 is on the terrace looking south, on the 8th floor terrace looking south. It's meant to be both therapeutic gardens for the residents, as well as just places to enjoy for the residents and their family members. And there will be some provisions for children to play as well, because one of the difficulties with family members visiting is sometimes children get bored, and so they can go up and play while the visit carries on. And then slide 36 is up on the penthouse terrace, looking southeast into the city and across the lake. One of the things we'll be working on is working with RWDI to do wind studies to make sure that these aren't windswept spaces. And you can see the beginnings of a screen that are around the outside of this planting area, which are our first attempts to mitigate that issue. Now on slide 37, this is the east elevation. So it's looking, a perspective looking onto the face of the building as it faces Cherry Street. So one of the challenges of this building type is the cellular repetition of each resident room. So each room is pretty much the same as the other, and each resident has a window that's pretty much the same as every other resident. So that's always, we've been doing this for a long time, and it's always the challenge that we have these, repetitive window openings in a facade. So here we've got, it's made up of 348 of these cells spaced together in a relatively regular grid throughout the facade. And then in the center, you can see at least the resident home areas are broken up into the common spaces. So it's not continuous all the way across the facade. In respect to the gathering of the windows, each person, each room is defined by a concrete frame. And the windows are recessed always just to the north edge of the concrete frame, back enough to provide a shadow from the southern sun. And then there's a canted brick plane, brick slips cast into the precast. So the window goes from the top to bottom of the frame, as does the brick slip, but each frame represents a person in a room, and the overall effect we can understand a bit as a bookcase. So if we go to the next slide, which is 38. So we've been looking at the spines of leather-bound books for some inspiration as to the selection of the brick patterning. So slide 39, we're looking at iron spot bricks. These are 6 different patterns that we're looking at doing, putting them together so that we can get a bit of a variation in the effect. And if you look at slide 40, the result really is that as each book tells a story, we're thinking, that obviously, every resident also has a story, and quite a remarkable story by this time of life. So it's possible to look at this building and imagine each and every person who lives within it. You can identify 348 of them in the facades. So that's from the east, and then and here you can also see clearly the 2-story gallery space along Cherry Street. And one thing I'll point out in this slide, and you'll see it later, is a plinth along the base of the building, which on the north side is at sitting height, and it occurs both on the outside of the building and inside the gallery. And by the time you get down to the south end of the building, it's more around, counter height, at about hip height. So it draws a straight line through the whole piece, and also gives you a measure of the gentle slope of the grade. And then in the center is a enlarged canopy identifying the entrance into the building. And the next slide, 41, is from the easement side, and the ground plane here doesn't actually represent yet what it is we're thinking of, which we'll talk a little bit later in the public realm. There's another entrance. We imagine this is where the ambulances will come and go. There are 3 garage doors that are the 6 parking spaces on the right-hand side, and on the left-hand side, there's a big garage door into a Type G loading space inside the building. And the glazing on the mezzanine level is into the administration area on the right side, and on the left side into the Humber College program. Slide 42 is looking at the south facade. So there you can see where the resident home area corridor wraps around the internal core and creates an informal seating area. You can see the terrace on the 8th floor and on the penthouse. And the next slide is a similar image from the north, Then the exterior of a resident home area with, well, I mean, these next 2 are really kind of inspired by the pandemic that we're going through right now, where there is all this isolation that's been going on, and in particularly it was going on within long-term care homes. So in the interior shot, we have a continuous desk sill so that people can be communicating with their loved ones on their iPads and so on. And that is really the story of all these buildings, which is that there's 348 people living here. Then we get into some context. So we'll look at the plans now. This is just, the first one is just showing it obviously on a aerial view. And if we go to slide 47.
Sorry to interrupt, Robert. This is Leon. You have about 3 minutes remaining.
Okay, well, this is a good time, right? Because I think everybody's seen these plans and knows how to read plans, obviously. So this is just for orientation purposes. You can see the yellow is the gallery space up and down Cherry Street, and then it cuts east-west. The lobby does through to the entrance at the rear. The thinking here is that residents, those who can do a meandering path up and down the gallery, and then up and down the street, and then even into the easement area at the back. So I think I'll skip through all these plans then, so that we can, and the renderings, which I think speak for themselves. And if we can go to the public realm piece, just so everybody understands. So slide 60, Dustin. So the intention is that this building would sit on a hard surface, a carpet, a landscape carpet. And slide 61, you know, it's the whole concept that this is a pedestrian realm onto which vehicles are invited, as opposed to the other way around. So the easement at the back will be we're trying to make very much like the living lane that you can see in the photograph on slide 61, and then some of the palleted materials that we're looking at this stage for the terraces and then 63 and 64 and 65 are just details of where we're at looking at those landscape roof terraces right now. And they will, you know, they have a very strong use in terms of recreational and space, outdoor space for the residents, as well as, you know, the climate enhancing benefits of the green roof. And I think that wraps up the presentation. I mean, there are just all these different views. Now, sustainability, I'll just say quickly, we have not done much on the sustainability issue, mostly because until a month ago, we didn't know whether we were going to be 348 residents or 220 residents. And it was after our positive meetings with the community and the councillor and the city, and always the great support of Waterfront Toronto, that we now know we're 348. So now we're diving into it. But we know that we're required to meet the Waterfront Toronto minimum grade building requirements 2.1 and LEED Gold version 4 building design and construction. And that's what we're setting out to achieve. So I'll hand it back to you, Sue and Peter.
Yeah, it's Peter. Just thank you very much for that, Bob. Extremely helpful. I just wanted to show you one of our residents who's one of my favorites. This is Edith She is 103 years old. She is active, interesting, and full of stories. Edith, because she shares a certain Hungarian heritage with me, has advised me that all Hungarians believe they will live forever. And not only that, but they will look good throughout that period. And certainly Edith brings great credibility to that thesis. But Edith is one of the many personalities, one of the many residents that we serve, and look forward to continuing to serve. Anyway, thank you very much for getting us to this point. Sue, do you have anything else you'd like to say?
No, I think you've wrapped it up nicely, Peter, and thank you, Bob, for unveiling the Rekai Center at Cherry Place. I have to say to members of the DRP, we're very proud of the work we've done, and we're very grateful for the comments we've been provided over the years from the Waterfront team and from the community, and we hope we've incorporated everything we could. Look forward to your comments now.
Paul, I think you're muted.
You're on mute, Paul. Paul, you're on mute.
There, how's that?
Better.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much for a great presentation, and it's a great way to end it with that beautiful photograph of Edith. We should all look that great at 103. So we're going to move. Our process is that we'll go for questions first and give you an opportunity to answer those, and then we'll go to comments from the panel. So I'll just read down the list of the members of the panel. If you have a question, please speak up. I'll start with Betsy, please.
Great presentation. No questions today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. George? George, are you there? I'll come back to George.
Okay.
Oh, here he is. Okay.
I'm unmuted now.
All right. You have
Okay.
a question, George?
Yes, for Bob Davies, and it's probably fairly straightforward. I just noticed on the east elevation image, which is about midway through the presentation, the lowest and the highest floor of each of the two blocks of residential rooms seem to have a different floor-to-floor height than the ones in between the lowest and the highest. I assume there's an obvious explanation for that. I'm just curious to know what it is.
Yes, George, the floor-to-floor is higher in both of those. So on the ground floor, it actually includes the mezzanine level. So it's quite a tall from the ground floor to the first resident home area floor. There's a mezzanine inserted in there. And
no, but I'm talking about the floor above that. The first
floor, right. So what we've done is we've actually dropped the exterior face of the facade lower than the floor level.
I see.
Right.
I see.
And then, similarly on the 8th floor, we did that's a good observation, George. Similarly on the 8th floor, we did a similar thing in order to bring the scale down within the glazed area. So the 8th floor is that much higher because of the mechanical penthouse requirement.
And then the uppermost floors of I see, of those two blocks is the same.
Yes.
There's a different explanation.
Well, it's just creating a bit of a parapet condition.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, George. Claude is not participating in this item, so we'll go to Peter, please.
No questions.
Okay, Bridget.
Yes, I had a question about the what you're calling the gallery space along Cherry Street, and just wanted a bit more of an understanding of whether it was circulation or there were things to do in that space.
It's an unprogrammed lounge space, Bridget. So there are groupings of furniture. There's actually a place near the entrance where it bumps out to make more of a gathering of furniture. But it's not just a circulating space. It's actually a space that you can occupy. And we've talked about the possibility of having coffee carts and various other things like that. But it's not a public space. It's for the residents themselves.
But it's very visible along the entire length of Cherry Street. So I guess I was just thinking about level of animation and activity in that space at different times of the day. I had one other question that was actually about the north and south facades. And what is the material for that?
Well, currently it's precast concrete, like the rest of the frames.
Okay.
Bridget?
Yeah.
Okay, Bridget?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Fadi, please.
Hello, a great presentation. I just have a quick question on page 56 and 57. It looks like there is some of your wonderful residents enjoying the sidewalks and the right-of-way and the public realm around the building. And I'm just wondering, for the sake of time, if you had if there was something you wanted to mention or describe around a strategy for the ground floor public activation, and if there are any kind of interactions that you would foresee or you would promote or you would be interested in at ground level, and how the indoor-outdoor spaces around the perimeter of the building might be envisioned or are envisioned for this project.
Well, it's envisioned that there would be a great deal of visual transparency between the two, with 3 points of access along Cherry Street. So at the north end of the gallery and at the south end of the gallery, and then at the midpoint where the main principal entrance is. One of the concerns that the Ministry of Long-Term Care have is the ability to secure a long-term care building, particularly in the event of an outbreak. So control points, access points are very important. So there isn't a continuous flow that we imagine back and forth between these two spaces, hence the plinths. But the thinking is that, a resident could be doing that loop, because walking is one of the activities which is very important and valuable to them, and use the plinth as a place to rest or lean or sit, depending on where they are on their journey, both on the inside and the outside. In addition to having, we imagine that there could be social events happening within that gallery space that are related to the home. Things that would normally happen in what we call the town square would be happening in this. It just has a different form. And certainly to your question, and I think somewhat Bridget's question as well, we really are thinking of this thing as being an active part of the street life, and the street life being an active part of this gathering space within the home.
If I could just jump in with a further comment from a programming perspective, we could, for example, have one of our pianos. We've had a number of pianos donated to us, and have pianos down there so that residents can play. We actually have residents who may not remember much, but they remember how to play. And so we could have, concerts. We've had quartets come in from the TSO. So this could be an area where, as Bob said, the residents enjoy being on the ground floor and looking out. And also, don't forget, we're going to have a large number of students with our college. So there'll be young people mingling with the residents themselves.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, Fadi. Eric, please. Any questions, Eric?
Yes, two questions. Actually, on that plan, the tenant space number 7 on the north side of the building, maybe what is it meant to be? What is it meant to be?
That we're looking at as a seniors assessment center. The conversations are preliminary right now, but what we're looking at is basically an ER for the frail and elderly, so that any resident in a long-term care home, a retirement home, or with the St. Mike's family practice, if they had a slip and fall, a urinary tract infection, pneumonia, basically low-end medical needs would go there rather than going to the acute care setting. Mm-hmm. Right now, the ERs are tied up with about 20% of the ERs in a normal period of time have seniors sitting there, and they can be sitting there for 10 or 12 hours while people, understandably, who are dealing with heart attacks are dealt with first. So this would allow us to deal with the needs of the elderly quickly and efficiently. We're also looking at an X-ray facility there, which would be read by a radiologist at St. Mike's, taking full advantage of the Beanfield technology that Waterfront provides.
Okay, thank you. The parkings, you have 5 parking spots. Who are those parking spots for? And just was on the lane, toward that area. It looks like there are spaces that can be enclosed, or so. Who are they for? And I guess, was there any other way that they were looked at about how they could be handled, like whether it's just normal at the surface?
Bob, do you want to start off, or do you want me to jump in?
Well, it's primarily for some staff and the occasional VIP, maybe Peter Rekai, people like that. I mean, it's a good question, Eric. We did look at putting parallel parking on the easement, on the surface there. But there's a real concern with youth, right? I mean, we experience it in our own building down on Spadina, right? That you think you have a parking spot until somebody else parks in it. So there's a whole control issue. So what our current proposal is suggesting is that we would have garage doors so that there could be control of who's actually using them.
And okay, go ahead.
Sorry, Eric, we actually did look at some length at putting parking underground. In fact, Honda next door wanted to potentially look at a shared use there, but it was impossible to do A, cost effectively, and B, the amount of space that we'd have to give up from healthcare use was too great. So we went back to the same number that we have at our other 2 long-term care homes. It was just 6 parking spots. The other area we really wanted to protect was that the offloading of the residents would be off the lane, not off Cherry, for traffic circulation reasons, because it takes time for people in wheelchairs to get in and out.
Oh, absolutely. And my last question had to do with the landscaping on the treatment of the. We kind of went quickly through it on the laneway itself, and was whether there was opportunity for additional planting for maybe tree or bushes or things just to soften, because it's quite a big opening, and whether or about what is the overall strategy from the landscaping on that laneway.
We're still in development of that. With respect to having planting there, I'm not sure that when you look at the requirements of all the particularly around the drop off of food and other goods that need to come into the building, the kitchen's down in the basement, kitchen laundry down in the basement, as well as the type G loading space, plus the needs from Honda and our building, it seems to us that we need pretty much all of the available surface for all that activity to occur. So I suppose we could look at putting in trees, but I have a feeling that they may not do so well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Jana, do you have any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. That was a great presentation. I just had one question. It's the black line at the base of the building. Is that meant to be is that suggesting a shadow? Is it a change of material?
It is a recess behind, and it's suggestive that it would be, probably a black granite or something that would stand the salt and other issues that are likely to attack the building.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Pat, are you there?
I am. I don't have any questions. Thank you. Great presentation.
Okay, Jeff?
Thanks, Peter. Actually, this is a good slide. So I'm just wondering, those screens that are up over the windows there, 2 questions about those. I mean, what's the primary function? Is that privacy? Is that trying to address solar heat gain on that side? And are the same screens on the other facade? I don't think we've actually seen a shot of the building on the other side.
Sorry, can you tell me which slide you're
Well, this one right that we're on the screen right now, which is 40, over the windows, it looks like there's a perforated screen on the exterior.
Sorry, I'm just getting there because I'm not. Yeah. On slide 40?
Yeah, I mean, any of the shots of the Cherry Street facade, the brown strips. Am I reading it?
Oh, those
are you referring to level 8,
that are,
the level?
Those are the brick slips that are.
Oh, okay.
If you go to slide 44, you'll see a close-up detail.
Okay. So they're not perforated at all.
Window in the brick.
Okay, so it just slips in. Okay.
And,
okay, I think it's, yeah. No, that's.
Sorry. You go to slide 13.
Yeah, there's the detail. And okay. And my second question, I mean, you sort of just touched on the sustainability piece at the very end, and that you haven't gone too far yet, but obviously you've got pretty ambitious targets. I know you've got an architecture firm that's done a lot of LEED projects, a lot of green building projects. But have you engaged a sustainability consulting team yet?
Yes, we have. We're working with Smith & Anderson on the mechanical, electrical, and footprint, who is their sustainability.
Okay, great.
Starting that process now.
Thanks, Jeff. Kevin, are you there?
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. So following up on Jeff's comments, I guess then I just want to confirm you had a slide there saying that you were going to target TGS Tier 2. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's great. So again, I guess we don't have a preliminary energy simulation available yet.
No, we don't, and I apologize for that. We didn't know how big our building was until several weeks ago. So now is time to really dive into it. But I will say that we have done LEED long-term care buildings before, but there are challenges because of the number of air exchanges that are required in this.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that in the next section.
Okay.
So this screen system that's on the this slide here of the brick screens, that's precast. Is that a insulated precast system?
Yes, it is. Everything is insulated on the outside of the structure, and then the precast.
I just meant, is this a sandwich panel?
No, it's not. Well,
okay.
I wouldn't say it's a sandwich panel. No, it's these
are we considering decentralized HVAC for this?
Decentralized? What do you mean by that? Justin, do you want to talk about the mechanical system?
Thanks very much.
Justin?
Sorry, you kind of cut out there at the end. But, not sure if
I'm sorry. That's great. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for the answers.
You're okay, Kevin, on those?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay, I just have one question from myself. First of all, I really appreciate all the work's gone into this, but in terms of the ground floor along Cherry Street, that's a prime space for multiple social interaction. I'm wondering if consideration of, facilities like for painting, art classes, fitness, concerts, cooking among some residents, even a bar, quite frankly. As many members of the panel know, unfortunately, I've had very intimate experience with my late wife living at Belmont House for over 7 years. And one of the things that really, really impressed me is the multitude of opportunities for all those interactions in the building. So just curious, what activities would take place in that ground floor along Cherry Street?
Go ahead,
Paul, Yes, we do have quite an array of activities. We have horticultural therapy, we have music classes, we have art classes. We've worked with OCAD on the art classes in the past. We do baking classes. These are all activities that we offer the residents, and they're quite popular as well. So I can see that sort of activity rolling out on the main floor for the residents.
Okay.
And the bar, I think, would be welcomed.
Yes, in fact, that was one of the highlights every day among certain residents to meet at the bar. So I wouldn't discount it. Okay, thank you for all those answers. So now we'll move to comments from the panel.
Paul, it's George. Can I
sorry.
ask a supplementary question?
Yeah.
Are the patients, or the residents who don't have dementia able to leave the building? I'm having in mind, should we expect in good weather that they would actually be on the Cherry Street and Front Street frontages just enjoying the outdoors in the sun?
Yes, that would very much be the case. One of the key reasons that Peter and Ellie and I really actively pursued this site was because of all these surrounding amenities. So they could be out on the street on Cherry Street just enjoying the good weather. But they could also be rolled down to Corktown Commons. 87% of our residents are in a wheelchair, by the way. Or they could go over to the Distillery District. So the surrounding neighborhood amenities are very important in the reason to pursue this site.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. Okay, let's move to comments. It's now 10:30, so if we could run through those as expeditiously as possible. I'll go back to Betsy first, please.
Thanks, Paul. I'll just start off with a couple of short comments because I'm sure the panel will fill in anything I've missed. Thank you for an excellent presentation. This project is such a huge improvement over what we saw a number of years back, and I think it's moving in a really, really positive direction, so thank you very much for this. My two comments are on the north and south facades to kind of bring those into the quality of the east and west facades. They do seem like almost like party wall conditions as opposed to main facades on relatively busy streets. So I think there needs to be a little bit of development there. I love the treatment of the east and the west sides. I think it's kind of, you've hit on something that's quite perfect. My other comment is really on the Cherry Street facade and kind of questioning how operable that facade could be. If you could look at if it works with a mechanical system to have a series of operable windows, ways to actually physically bridge in between the two spaces. So it's not so much of a fishbowl and more, and during the beautiful summer weather and the swing seasons, you can actually interact between the street and the ground floor. I'm going to leave it there and let everyone else fill in because we've got a full panel today, but thank you very much.
Thanks, Betsy. George?
Yes, I too will just make one comment. I, like Betsy, was impressed by the presentation, and I noted that Bob mentioned that you're going to do some wind studies with our WDI, particularly in respect to the terraces on the 8th floor and on the roof. And I just wanted to underline the importance of that. I paid a visit for the first time to Bridge Point, which has a roof terrace. And there the issue is more noise from the Don Valley Parkway than it is wind. But they have a glass screen on the west edge of the roof terrace at Bridge Point, which works extremely effectively to mask the noise of the parkway. And that roof terrace was extremely amenable and extremely well used. So I encourage you to do everything you can to make the conditions of occupation of those terraces as comfortable as they can be from both a wind and, if necessary, noise perspective. Thank you.
Thanks, George. Peter?
Yeah, first of all, congratulations to the architects and the owner's rep here on a fantastic project. We see a lot of projects through here and very, very few of this kind of quality. I also have deep personal experience with care homes and even a hospice, and I noticed how much pleasure my mother and my father-in-law and got in looking at nature. They sit still for extended periods of time as the process of deterioration advances. This project would be so much better if you got a little greenery on each one of those niches so that they could look out at some flowers or something. You could handle the watering of it fairly easily with an operable window on the inside. I know this is a cost item, but biophilia as a part of medical care in people, poor people, is really important. So that's just a request. I know it's a cost item, but the pleasure of each and every resident would be increased if they could just see a few flowers out in front of the window as they sit there. And you'll find some residents will put, bird feeders out there, and some residents will undertake the watering themselves as they're capable. It would be an intimate and a wonderful addition to the project. Notwithstanding that, it's a great project as is. Those are my comments.
Great, thank you. Bridget?
Yes, I echo my colleagues with appreciation of an important and good presentation, and really a very important, like, post-COVID typology. It's such a kind of important area of our society that we need to get to make better. What I really enjoyed was the plasticity and the depth created by those canted brick panels on your west and east side. So I really feel that more attention is needed to the north and south elevation, whether that's brick or articulation of the precast. You guys will kind of figure that out, but I feel like they look like they're orphans right now and they need to be brought into the overall. I want to underline Paul's comments about the communal space. It's a very long and skinny space. Yeah, so this is the elevation of the north and south, which I think really just need a bit of TLC to kind of be really brought into the overall composition right now. Then I think this long, skinny communal space, I would think it would benefit by having support spaces behind. Right now, it looks like most of the support, the wall behind this long, skinny space is occupied by back of house services. And I actually think you need to have some of those spaces support front of house services, like the kind of programs that were described. You need storage for all kinds of weird stuff. And so in a way, I feel like to support this long, thin space properly, to ensure the right level of kind of engagement with the YMCA, the streetcars, the pedestrian activity on this side of the street, is a really key aspect of the way that this facility can really make a positive contribution to the public realm along Cherry Street, but also that the residents can truly benefit from the ongoing daily activities of that street. Just one or two smaller comments. The overhang on the top floor could actually be cantilevered even further on the south side, so that you actually provide really integrated sun shading, so that you actually don't need umbrellas or things like that, that it's actually already built into the kind of infrastructure of the building. And I think that just given the windy kind of possibilities there, that would be great. And then I think that I was hoping that you might be able to get some balconies off of the elevators on the kind of public floors, so that there were smaller outdoor spaces. So right now you've got big outdoor spaces on the 8th floor and on the roof, but I was wondering whether on the west and east side at the elevator cores you might be able to get some small outdoor spaces, or maybe it's how the windows open up, so that you really have a bit more intimate public outdoor space as well as these larger outdoor spaces. And then I thought that I really love the desk window combination in each of the resident rooms. And I think that you really need to think about how a resident, let's say in a wheelchair like this, would actually be able to open their own window. I would say that some of the work we've done with these types of facilities, the individual's control over their own environment is one of the things that makes it a home versus an institution. And if you were able to open, like you might need an extending arm or something so that you could open your own operable window and you wouldn't need to call someone to do that. I think that would be, it would really transform at a very micro scale the kind of daily experience. I think Peter's idea about being able to have some kind of outdoor individual planting area is also great. So thank you so much for a big, huge leap forward, and we look forward to seeing it in the neighborhood.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay. Fatty?
Paul, can I just add a
Oh,
point
sure.
of information to that comment that Bridget made? Dustin, if you go to slide 51 as an example, we do have, to your point, Bridget, your excellent point about more terrace on each of the floor levels. There, if you hit number 13 on that, it is an outdoor terrace there from each of the dining facing into the downtown core. And we at one time had them at the north and south end as well, but for security reasons, we left those behind because they tend to be locked unless there's proper supervision.
Right.
But I think trying to get a little more at the elevator lobby 15 will certainly worth looking at.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Fatty?
Yeah, hello. Thank you so much. I agree with my colleagues. I think this is a really beautiful building and a wonderful presentation. I especially really loved this idea of these recessed windows and the expressions of the individuals who are living inside the building. And I think that one suggestion by Peter even takes that one step further. And I really I think that would be a really wonderful addition and thing to do in the building. I also wanted to speak really quickly about something that George touched on, which is really trying to ensure the success of the outdoor spaces and access, as you all know, to kind of green spaces in a highly urbanized area is not only good for the mental health of the aging communities, but it's good for the mental health of all of us. Especially as we were all locked up in our tiny little condos. So you're really ensuring that there's adequate water, light, and microclimates on these terraces is going to be really pivotal for their success, and I'm confident that you will achieve that. Additionally, I'm really excited about your response about the ground floor and ground floor activation as needed, especially along the public realm. And I'm wondering here if there's a design opportunity as well to rethink the sidewalk, the street furniture, the lighting, the ground texture, the curb cuts in service of the mobility and the well-being of your residents. And in this case, I'm wondering if there's even a potential second mini design project to work with your OCAD research team and or with Waterfront Toronto to really think about how the public realm and the right-of-ways and the sidewalks, not only just around the building, but around might be something that could be facilitating the ease of circulation and actually encourage interaction at ground level when needed and if possible to maintain both the health of obviously keeping the kind of health of the residents as a priority and their safety. So I think there's a lot of really exciting potentials in that regard and potentially a lot of embedded knowledge that might be transferable to other parts of the city or other areas where the public realm and long-term care might be pushed forward in future projects. But with that said, I really appreciate the work and I congratulate the team.
Thanks,
Thank
Patty.
you. Could I just jump in and let you know that last evening, actually, George Brown has now introduced a new team of interactive design focused on the aging. And they reached out yesterday to ask if we would work with them on the Rekai at Cherry, given that we're across the street from their residences and have a lot of relationships with George Brown. So that's a concept we can take back forward to a discussion with the George Brown team as well.
Good. Okay.
I just want to jump in and just remind everybody that we do have a public realm design for this whole neighborhood that is intended to, create continuity. And I think some of this public realm might already be built. I can't remember if this block is built out or not, but that is another objective. So I'm not sure how much intervention on the public sidewalk is possible. So that's just a counterpoint to keep in mind.
Okay, let's keep moving to Eric, please.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you very much for, this is a wonderful program. It's much needed, something we don't have enough downtown. So I think it's is a fabulous. Overall, this is something that is going to be a great contribution and much needed into the waterfront. So thank you. I do. So there's some comments I'm going to make here that are, in terms of suggestion about how I think certain things could be continued to advance and push further. I like the way the articulation, the breaking the program, that you had in the early presentation, how the massing is modeled works quite well. I do found though that in the I think the north-south facade, I the same thing that I think Betsy and Brigitte are quite right. I think that needs to be further looked into how to integrate it better with the building. It feels like a party wall. On the east facade, particularly, is it's a 100-meter facade. I think that there might be some. I think it needs to maybe just have a look a bit at how to maybe. It feels a bit monolithic, and I'm wondering if we look at your LTC zone diagram on page 29, is whether the white grid that you have that express the individuality of each of the windows, that could and what I like with some of these diagrams is it kind of shows a cue that maybe the center of the building doesn't have to be, if we go back to the to the east facade, that does the center area has to have that same concrete white grid, or could it be slightly modified? Could it be treated slightly different? Because it is a bit of a different part. It is a different part of the program, and that to me may help to just like soften, make it less monolithic, just to have it a little bit more articulation or a little bit of difference of treatment, to just to break the length of the facade, because it is probably one of the longest facade in the entire waterfront in that part of the world. So that's something I would encourage from further looking at. On page 57, if and this is, I was looking in the plan. I think that the entrance, the main entrance, the main front door of the building seems to be a little bit underplay. So I would encourage maybe that the front door could be the main entrance could be further looked at. Right now it looks like a single door on that that's hidden right there by the column. I think maybe there could be a way to make it a little bit more prominent. Not sure how you do it, but it's something that I think right now is underplay. I always like to be able to read the front door of the building where people can point to it. It makes it helps the animation of the street. It makes the building read more intuitively. I think that on the Cherry Street, the corridor, I know it is. So I think everyone's point, make sure that it's very well articulated. I think having spaces, as it was mentioned by Brigitte and by Paul in his question, that having spaces that are attached to it that can actually contribute to that animation, that spaces that are carved out, that have, I don't think right now you would have the space for a piano could be, yes, on the center section, but I think you need to have places that can feed in and out and at the activities that can happen there. Some of the wall can actually be especially that are visible from the street. The interior wall could be look as a a canvas for the stories of the resident. Is it some arts? Is it some things that can actually be there, but also really help to one animate that frontage, and maybe it's part of the story that some of the resident can be can contribute to, whether they're drawings, whether they're a piece of arts, or it's the treatment itself. Maybe it's the lighting, etc. I was not to contradict Fadi, but I was also going to mention the Chris comment. I like the simplicity of the streetscape along along Cherry, which I think is exactly is that contribution. There is an overall coherent streetscape happening around the entire neighborhood. I do think that the laneway side, and I think that's just a question of continuing to develop. Right now, it's very much schematic, but understanding in the next phase the level of details. It's a very wide opening between a Honda dealer and the existing building. So how do you treat the surface? What are elements that are that can actually help to create a great texture? What are kind of the way the lighting works? These garage doors. Are they garage door? Are they more like fencing? Are they gates? I think the whole treatment there is important because I suspect they will be more more pedestrian and maybe wheelchair that will actually go through that space. So how it's designed as a muse, as a place that it's really a textured surface, and how those walls are treated on the buildings, I think are quite critical. But overall, great. It's much improved on the first scheme. On the first time we see it, my comments are really suggestion about how to continue to advance this fantastic projects. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Eric. Janet?
Thanks, and thanks, Bob. I agree with all my colleagues. It was a great presentation. It's going to be a fantastic building. And this is the right slide to be on. Again, I think for me, if you could think a bit about the kind of column of windows in the center, it seems to lack the kind of finesse and elegance of the way you've treated and really worked on the grid of the rooms. It seems almost like a bit of another being as the two wings flanking it move towards it. Maybe you could recess it a bit to get a bit more of the shadow and play that you've developed somewhere else. But other than that, I think it's going to be a great contribution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Pat?
Yeah, really interesting presentation. Thanks very much for being as thoughtful as it was. This project, I mean, they're really challenging types. I mean, it's a monoculture, and being in one of these buildings, and so I appreciate the kind of the repetition and identification of each of the rooms as giving some identity to the building, and actually, I guess, it's sort of trying to deinstitutionalize what is kind of one group of people living together. So to that end, I think the comments about the north and south facades are useful in rethinking those a bit to sort of continue to try and soften the appearance of the building and to make it, I guess, a scale that is more about the individual. And then another comment about the appearance of the building on the west side would be perhaps the lower floors, the first lower 6 floors, should have a kind of a different consideration than the facade along Cherry. It's a completely different environment, has completely different views, completely different kind of condition to the building because of its neighboring building to the east. So I think that could be considered differently, and particularly the area, the sort of amenity area in the building. I think that the use of masonry is hugely effective in terms of bringing a kind of domestic, residential, softer feel to the building, and really successful. So more brick might be better than less. And then just lastly, just to reiterate everybody's concerns about the ground floor a little bit, I think it's partially the narrowness of it at the north and south end. So maybe more bay windows along the street edge so that there's more opportunity for lounge spaces for people to sit there and actually just watch the activity that's going on the street. I know that with my mother, that was what she wanted to do, was watch the street. And so I appreciate that it's really an ambulatory, but more opportunity to be able to just sit along that window wall would also help to, I think, deinstitutionalize the feeling of the building at the ground floor. Thanks.
Thanks, Pat. Jeff?
Thanks. Yeah, just a couple of comments. I mean, from a performance perspective, when you get into it, the biggest issue I think you're going to have with the long facades facing east and west is going to be solar heat gain and how you address that and what do you want to do with that. And you'll get a lot of insight through the energy analysis. But really looking at thermal comfort as a key issue here, I think is going to be a challenge. It's really hard to shade those. I know you've got inset windows that'll help when the sun's facing straight south, first thing in the morning, and particularly late in the afternoon. I think you're going to have glare issues and potentially some heating, overheating issues in the summertime. And dropping that cooling load down is obviously going to help a lot on the expenses around your air conditioning costs. You get a lot of ventilation in this building. I might actually push back a little bit on some of my colleagues about that south facade, specifically because those large opaque runs could potentially be very well suited for a solar wall. If you wanted to do some solar preheat of your ventilation, your makeup air, that would be a really cost-effective way to save some money, save some energy. And having a large surface like that south facing would certainly help given the amount of ventilation in the building. I'll let Kevin get a little bit more into the HVAC, but I assume because you're compartmentalizing everything, you're going to be looking at individual suite HRVs, a decentralized system, as you mentioned. There's a bunch of different strategies for that. And that's, those would be sort of my primary concerns. Is you've got RWDI doing the wind analysis. I'd look at a solar study. I'd look at solar heat gain, thermal comfort analysis inside the building before you get too far down the design. Okay, thanks.
Okay. And finally, Kevin.
Thanks very much. I think it's an absolute. I think it's a lovely proposal. Thank you very much. As Jeff said, I would like to sort of tuck in just a little bit to I think what could be some excellent opportunities for this building, in particular, especially the way in which it's been organized. I think the way to achieve advanced levels of TGS compliance is to look at a low TEDI approach. This building, just the way that you've structured it, as you call that kind of cellular nature of the facades, can actually, I think, really support a low TEDI approach. So I would recommend performing a whole building conductivity analysis. We want to be around, for tier 2, we want to be around 8.5 total conductivity at a minimum. If you can move up towards R10, then we can start stabilizing that interior environment, and then you can start putting in the low intensity HVAC systems that support really high performance. So that's where I love this idea of the precast completely outboard of the structure, so we can get that continuous level of insulation. I noticed that you've controlled the window to wall ratio, which is amazing. One thing that I really want to, I mean, obviously, COVID is talked about a lot, and I'm a member of ASHRAE, and within ASHRAE, that's a huge obsession at the moment in terms of how can buildings help mitigate the spread of pathogens. And most of our buildings in North America over the last 50 years have basically the worst HVAC systems for spreading around pathogens to everybody. So if somebody in one corner has a problem, well, we're just going to take it into a central system and spread it around as much as possible to everybody else. So there's a real opportunity for your mechanical designers to design an extremely high indoor air quality facility to manage this situation. So, I would encourage looking at dedicated outdoor air systems. Jeff mentioned decentralized systems. If that's at all a potential, that would be amazing. What we're studying in high-rise buildings vis-a-vis stack effect really interrupts the proper distribution of air by central systems. So if you can decentralize and compartmentalize any spaces within this high-rise building, you'll get much more effective low-power delivery of higher quality indoor air. So one thing that ASHRAE is saying is, and I don't think this is, this is common sense, filtration can have a huge positive impact on both infection control and high indoor air quality. So the idea with dedicated outdoor air systems is that, we don't re-entrain, indoor air. That's going to be very positive for a facility like this, but also you can slide in higher cartridges of filtration if there's a problem. So the idea is the system can spool up and spool down depending on the risk or the heightened risk, depending on, the discretion of the operations. So I'm just really encouraging, as we move into that step, looking at the preliminary energy model, that we really focus on super high quality ventilation systems to both deal with COVID, and as you're dealing with COVID, you're actually improving comfort and reducing energy. They all go together. So with that low TIDI approach, dedicated outdoor air systems, if you can decentralize, all these things will combine to get you a low energy building. And I really encourage you to get that tier 2 level of compliance, and maybe when you're there, you can kind of look at how you can get into tier 3, so on and so forth. But yeah, so that those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. I'm going to try and summarize a lot of excellent comments here, and I think I'll just start with
Paul,
saying.
Sorry, Paul. I think Jeff had one more comment.
Oh, he did? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries, Paul. Just a really quick one, and this is just a consideration to talk about an opportunity because of the modular nature of the building itself. One strategy we've been seeing applied a lot towards healthcare is prefabrication, particularly of the bathroom units, and having those built off-site and just slotted in the exterior of the building. I know Humber River did that. There's a couple companies that are doing this locally now. A lot of advantages just around sort of speed of construction, waste reduction. Might be something worth exploring just from a process perspective here.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Okay, I'm going to try and summarize a lot of excellent comments here, and I just want to start by just saying I think everyone is very appreciative of the work that's been done. Everyone, I think, shares the common goal that we want this to be a state-of-the-art first new long-term care home built in the city during the COVID crisis, and it needs to be a home, not an institution. So with that in mind, there's a number of suggestions that we think would be useful to take a look at here carefully. First of all, on the building, in no particular order, suggestions to look at the north and south facades, bring them to the level of quality that you find in the east and west. Suggestion to take a look perhaps at different treatment on the west facade, given the facing condition next to the Honda dealer. A lot of commentary on the ground floor and the Cherry Street facade. Everyone, I think, is saying maximize the opportunity for activation and interaction with the street. Number of suggestions, improve the main front door entrance so it's a welcoming, I'm home kind of feeling. Possible openings of like garage panels perhaps should be investigated, so there's opportunity to, at the appropriate areas, to spill out onto the Cherry Street public realm. The range of uses that could be in the ground floor have been talked about by many people, including art classes, interaction, concerts, social interaction, perhaps fitness, tuck shop. The list is pretty long, but I think all those need to be incorporated and explored. In terms of the public realm and landscape, I think people are basically saying maximize again that streetscape on Cherry Street. Various people have said from their own personal experience with their parents or loved ones that people in long-term care don't move much, but they sure love to sit and watch the street activity. And especially here with the streetcar coming and going, the Y close by, the evolving neighborhood, I think this is a fabulous opportunity. One of the things that I think is very, very important is also not only in the nice weather to allow people to get outside and experience all seasons, but in the middle of winter. One of my experiences at Belmont House was in the dead of winter, people would gravitate to the windows in the dining rooms and the lounges just to feel the warmth of the sun coming in. And quite frankly, that was a major consideration. Some of you may know when there was a major high-rise condo proposed to the south of Belmont House that was defeated at the OMB based on the exposure to light and the sun. So it's a very important consideration for the elderly. Number of suggestions about improving the amenities associated with the rooms, more greenery throughout, especially consideration of greenery adjacent to the rooms, flowers, small shrubs, etc., what have you, just for that, to promote that interaction with nature. Possibility of balconies at the elevated locations was mentioned. I think we're happy to see that there are outdoor terraces at the dining areas. One of the other things I just want to comment on in terms of the quality of the experience on the mid-level terrace and the rooftop terrace is the importance of wind protection. And George mentioned his experience in visiting another facility, and that's really critical. People love to sit out in a comfortable environment that they're not blown away by. So that's critical. Last couple of comments that I would make is just an observation. 348 residents at an average age of, say, 80 to 85 equals 3,000 life years of experience. There is a massive, massive resource of expertise, knowledge, storytelling, et cetera, and all of that has to be captured in the way this facility is planned and how people will use these facilities. I know that was a critical issue for me visiting my late wife at Belmont House. So just don't forget that, please. In terms of sustainability, various comments made about explore a potential for a solar wall and have a study of that. The wind study, of course, has been mentioned, connectivity analysis, and explore the opportunities to maximize the best air quality possible for obvious reasons, especially during COVID, and suggestions of a decentralized system were mentioned. And finally, explore the possibility of prefab bathroom units, et cetera, being constructed to help save costs and to expedite the construction of it. There are many, many more comments, but I think those are the main ones that have been mentioned. I think everyone appreciates the work that's gone into this and the quality of it. And I have to say, what a wonderful place to live in your declining years, in a neighborhood like that, where people are going to be part of the daily activity and the function of the neighborhood. I think the very last comment I want to make is my understanding is that this is going through an approval process, whether it's going to be considered a committee of adjustment matter or rezoning or something else. But I think that's up to the city, of course, and the powers that be. But I think that, in my view, given the height and given the surrounding context of the building, I think a committee of adjustment application is certainly warranted for something like this. So I'll just make that comment for myself. So it's our custom now to take a vote. This is schematic design. And given the nature of the comments, I would propose a motion of support. Is there anyone in disagreement with that?
Paul, do we need to give the proponents a response time?
Yes, I'm going to do that. Yep. Hearing none, so can I conclude the vote is unanimous as a vote of support for the record?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So back over to the proponent. It's also your opportunity to respond to any of the comments that you've heard from the panel members in the summary I've just given. So I'm not sure who would like to do that. Perhaps Peter?
Hang on. I'm just working on it.
Who wants to speak for the proponent? This is your opportunity to share your reaction.
Okay.
So Sue, I thought maybe I'd jump in. It's
Sure, jump in.
Firstly, I want to thank all the panel members for their insightful comments and for their support. I just wanted to jump in because I wanted to mention that several of the matters that you've raised have already been discussed and are being discussed and will continue to do so. I very much appreciated the comments regarding activation of the ground floor. I know Bob's team's looking at it and will continue to do so. Things like, strangely enough, even things like investigating prefab washroom components, or actually prefab washroom units, have been discussed and are going to be investigated. Bob's team, we know, will be getting into sustainability much greater. As he said, we just recently settled on the actual size of the building, so a little hard to, but I know the minds of his team are focused on that. And some of the comments regarding, facade, further facade activation in areas like, or further facade articulation, differences in facade articulation around the center and the north and south walls, already starting to be discussed. So welcome those comments, and we'll see where they take us. Bob's team's done, I think, great work.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that concludes this item, and we look forward to the evolution of the project and it coming back. So thank you very much for everything.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Paul.
you.
Thank you for all of this. Much appreciated.
Thanks, everybody.
So welcome, everyone. We're going to deal with item 2, Rees Street Park. This is issues identification, so there is not a vote attached to it. It's here for the first time. So I believe, Adam, you're going to do the introduction. Are you there?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Adam Novak, and I'm a design project manager with Waterfront Toronto. And we're pleased to be here today for Rees Street Park issues identification. This has been a long time in the making, and we're quite excited to be here. I just want to give a little bit of background and description on the project. So this project is a partnership between Waterfront Toronto and City of Toronto, Parks, Forestry, and Recreation. And we are co-leading the park project, the two of us. The design competition winning entry was announced on October 9th, 2018, and Rees Ridge by Y was chosen as the winning entry for Rees Street Park. Waterfront Toronto will manage the design and construction of Rees Street Park, which needs to be closely coordinated with Toronto Water's Rees Street Park wet weather flow storage shaft, part of the Don Valley and Central Waterfront Inner Harbor West Tunnel. And that's the large stormwater shaft that will be coming to Rees Street Park. And currently, we're in the consensus design phase. So the scopes and objectives of this phase are to achieve the following. First, we're basically adjusting the competition entry to address jury, Waterfront Toronto, Parks, DRP, and stakeholder feedback on the design. Also, at the same time, we need to align the competition entry with the revised construction budget, which I'll touch on further in a moment. And we also need to align and coordinate our park design with the stormwater shaft that will be constructed by Toronto Water in the future. So coordination of the two projects is a big part of our objectives at the moment. Since the competition, we've basically, in collaboration with City of Toronto Parks, have realigned our scope priorities in terms of what we really see as being the priorities for this park. Those include enhanced playground elements, active recreation, including basketball courts, which may potentially commemorate the Raptors championship, washrooms, lawn, including flat zones for activities, accommodation for dogs, providing flexible space for outdoor markets and food vendors, and also necessary utilities such as electric and water connections, water feature within the park, accommodating the future shaft and integration into the park, either in a building or non-building solution. Most likely the park will be constructed before the shaft, so it's quite important that we're properly coordinated between the two, and optimizations of the ridge. We've identified the following as reduced scope priorities. The food service facilities, including the domestic kitchen and cafe, the community room, and the east leg of the ridge. With regards to the budget, When we ran the competition, the budget for the project was $10 million construction budget. And since the competition, we've been directed by the city that the updated construction budget only for phase 1 is $6 million. So there is a pretty substantial change to the budget. And in the event that the park is delivered in 2 phases, the budget would only be for phase 1. And this budget does not include environmental either. So environmental and future phases are not included in this budget. We also want to give a recap from the jury report from 2018. In summary, the jury has concerns about the cost and complexity of this proposal and offered the following qualifications and conditions, which should be taken as advice in development of the design. First, the north side of the ridge must address Lakeshore Boulevard and create an inviting and safe experience for all users of the street. The design should include no tunnels and no dead ends, opening up cuts to Lakeshore for safety. Park-like slopes, ramps, and other features required by AODA should be appealing, realistic, and avoid looking like access ramps to a building. The top walkway must be lower than the Gardner Expressway and also be shielded from it. Remove the large cantilever at the east end of the ridge, as it is difficult to operate as a public space and costly to construct. Reconsider the waterfall or integrate it better into the landscape. Provide more slopes that are occupiable. Bolster the role of landscape design within the team and enhance the landscape and planting plans. Create sample one-to-one mock-ups of the slopes and vegetation in advance of construction for Waterfront Toronto and Parks to review and approve. Make the western edge of the site more permeable and open at-grade apertures at each corner. The jury supports the team's interest in Indigenous engagement in the design. Aspects of this project feel like a building. When complete, it must feel like a lush landscape. The play value must be enhanced through greater attention to the equipment, surfaces, and range of the users. And lastly, the project must come in on budget. Next, want to give kind of a little overcap of where we're situated in the central waterfront. So this highlighting shape is Rees Street Park, basically, which sits at the northwest intersection of Queens Quay and Rees. HTO Park is directly to the south, and then York Street Park is further to the east. Also want to highlight too, which I'll touch on in a moment, Rees Street is an important gateway from the downtown to the waterfront. John Street, which is situated and stops currently at Front Street, does have a pedestrian connection, which is being further enhanced. Just kind of want to touch on the city's kind of current project in which John Street is currently being enhanced to create kind of a better pedestrian realm, which is shown on the left-hand side, which will consist of wider boulevards, reducing the width of the roadway to provide more public realm, additional trees, enhanced paving materials, and public art. On the right-hand side, we've basically drawn out kind of a critical pedestrian connection that currently exists from John Street down to the waterfront, which does pass by many cultural institutions such as the Rogers Center, the CN Tower, the Aquarium, and the Roundhouse. It's one of the only pedestrian connections that goes over the railway tracks at the moment and underneath the Gardner. So we really see it kind of as a pretty robust connection to downtown, given the friendliness to pedestrians and also kind of the amenities in close proximity. With regards to the site context, kind of zooming in, this red outline is Rees Street Park. As I mentioned, at the south, we have HTO Park. Directly to the north, we have Gardner, which offers views of the CN Tower and Skydome beyond. Within Rees Street is the location of the future Toronto Water storm shaft, which will sit somewhere in this area. Directly to the west, we have retail frontage of 350 Queens Quay, which is currently under development. Further to the west, we have Peter Slip Basin. And then if I jump over here to the south, we have the Rees Street Wave Deck. And then moving further to the east, we have the John Key Power Boating and Sailing Center. So there's a lot of amenities in close proximity as well. And then also kind of considering many of the key views, we see kind of really one of the most iconic views from Queens Quay, looking north, backdrop to the Rogers Center, and then also to the CN Tower, the frontage to Lakeshore, looking at kind of how this offers views to the east and to the west of the waterfront, views from Rees Street that really offer views back towards the city and cultural connections, and then to the south to the water, and then also kind of the iconic Queens Quay views. So these are the views today, basically looking north. Pretty uninterrupted other than the Gardner view toward downtown and the CN Tower, which is cut off in this photo. Looking north further back from HTO Park. So we're south of Queens Quay right here, looking north toward the city. Then really considering kind of the views along Lakeshore and Rees too. Understanding that this is kind of one of the only moments in which the view underneath the Gardner is opened up toward the water, which you can kind of see uninterrupted to the left side of this image. View from Queens Quay looking east. So Rees is right here. And then this is the future location of the park. And then from a similar vantage point looking west. So this parking lot right here is the future Rees Street Park, looking to the west. With regards to kind of where we are in the approvals process. So right now we're at the issues identification stage. So after today, our next visit would be for schematic design. And then potentially a second time for schematic design, depending on the panel's vote. And then after that detailed design, then potentially another detailed design review as required, and then potentially another review for construction documents as required. From here, I'd like to touch on areas that we've identified for the panel's consideration. So the first item is with regards to the ridge and the park design. I'd like to understand the ideal scale, height, materiality, and slope of the face of the ridge and the sides of the ridge. The overall characteristic and aesthetic of the ridge. In particular, the appearance of dramatic walls or something more gentle, such as hills and berms. The planting strategy of the ridge and the park in general, specifically on slopes and exposed faces that are prone to their each individual microclimate. The clarity and hierarchy of view corridors with consideration to first kind of views to the larger city and context in waterfront, but then also looking at a sense of safety and security, both within the park and then conditions adjacent to the park, such as along Lakeshore. A sense of permeability through the site, kind of how the site sits in consideration to the context. And then lastly, the integration of the future stormwater shaft into the park design. Looking at a little bit more zoomed out with regards to the adjacent streets. First one is Rees Street. So looking at the Rees Street frontage and the important connection north and south, north being to the city's core, and then south to the waterfront along Queens Quay, looking at how we're addressing the Queens Quay frontage and the threshold condition between Queens Quay and the park, and also the adjacent development and ground floor activation that we know is coming through the 350 Queens Quay project on the west side of the park. And then lastly, along the lakeshore frontage and the multi-use trail, which runs adjacent to lakeshore, looking at that in relationship to the Gardner with the idea of screening, not buffering. And that concludes the introduction. So from here, I'd like to turn it over to Mark Dolman with Y. Thank you.
I've got a question, Paul.
Yeah, I know, Peter. Yeah, go ahead.
Adam, you mentioned as part of the budget cutting process that phase one would no longer include environmental. Could you please explain what that means?
Sure. So we are doing environmental as part of
What's
phase
environmental?
one.
Sorry, what's environmental?
Sure. Environmental is remediation to the site. So it is a contaminated site to some level. So we will need to get an RMM from the Ministry of the Environment, which involves kind of remediating all the contaminated soil on site. So that's something that we will do, but that'll be funded separately above and beyond the construction budget of the park.
You will do it.
We will do it. But,
okay, well, that was not
but we'll
clear.
have additional funding beyond the 6 million to cover the expense.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. Okay, Mark, are you ready? You can make the presentation.
Yes, thank you. So I wanted to, I just wanted to start very quickly with, you know, as a child, one of my fondest memories really was this Toronto skyline, taking the ferry from to Center Island and just being totally captivated always by the CN Tower. And then eventually, as I was growing up, when the Sky Dome started construction and was completed. So it really was this, you know, first experience that I had of a major city and this iconic view of the waterfront. So, you know, we're really excited to see all the work that's been done and be part of this evolution. So one of the things too, at why we always start our projects by asking, you know, what was here before, you know, the context of the site, the things that are seen or even unseen below the surface. And also, you know, included in that is what was in our imaginations. So this idea of the bluffs, you know, being, you know, just obviously east of the downtown waterfront, really for us became this kind of starting point, and one that started to, in our minds, as we were looking at the context, started to address these complexities of the site, which, as Adam has gone over, there's really no shortage of complexity on the site. So again, you know, this is Adam showed some of the context, but you know, part of our exploration was looking at where do we have room for more program, more park space, and you know, we started by looking at kind of cataloging the existing spaces in the neighborhood. You know, knowing the site here is this empty parking lot, which is right in that framed iconic view of the city, that postcard view, and you always kind of see that line, you know, the Sky Dome and the tower sitting on this elevated platform of the Gardner in that view. So what if we brought the bluffs to town? What would that do? What is part of the existing shoreline? How does it fit in? You know, we looked at ravines and how these natural systems start to kind of create an imagination of what if that was part of the that skyline in that image. And we were really keen to look at all the things we know in terms of the Gardner and the pollution and the noise and the visual pollution, and you know, and how do you start to really address that? How do you start to create a streetscape that both frames some of the assets and identity of the city? How do you start to screen, you know, and putting up this barrier to address that? Of what, you know, the simplest way to hold unpleasantries back is looking at that wall, but that's not such a nice feature. So we started to sculpt that surface, look at how that surface could start to connect and be part of the experience of the adjacent context in the city. How do we start to carve into that and you know, create access, you know, north and south through to the city, both for people and for views, and for the cars, you know, coming along the Gardner, and then inserting landscape on top of that. So this idea of the green over the gray, and how can that be, this interpretation of a bluff and an urban park. And then, of course, one of the things that we always like is creating elevation in public spaces starts to create those visual triangulations for safety and the like. So that led to this idea of this new kind of front room in the city alongside the Gardner that would have all sorts of different program and garden spaces. And and that's where we were at the competition phase, as Adam suggests. And so these were the imagery that you've probably seen from the competition phase. And since then, we've really, and part of that was to try to, part of our thesis in that was by having the ridge and not just a flat experience of the park, we can actually start to increase the amount of program that's possible in the park. So going back and starting to look at how do we really address the comments. And one thing that we realized that in the competition was we had created a kind of a full barrier across the elevation. It was a consistent elevation along the Gardner. And going back to our initial inspiration, we again looked at the bluffs and started to see that really, there's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of character, there's a lot of, formal articulation in the bluffs. And if we started to bring that back to this revised proposal, how could that start to impact our original proposition? So we've been looking at a number of different elevational studies, and this 15 meters that we were showing on average in the competition, and then 10 meters in some of our earlier studies, and now starting to look at a variation even sectionally and elevation wise from a 6 to 10 meter. And I think that is also taken into context that we're not ever completely hiding the Gardner, but we're starting to use a combination strategy of planting and this ridge structure that starts to create that that visual separation that we had articulated in the competition. Looking at that, we've done a number of studies to see the different, what people are seeing from the Gardner looking back. We do think maintaining that experience of driving down the Gardner and seeing that opening, where there's this gap in the skyline of all the residential towers that you see the lake at that point is kind of a nice perspective from the Gardner. And then on the flip side, being along Queens Quay, and then even within the within the park and gardens, if you start to look at the different elevations, you can see that it's either the ridge structure or the planting starts to provide that screen and buffering that we were looking at this new optimized ridge thing. So this becomes the new image of that we've been playing with, and really starting to look at, and we'll see this in plan 2. So it's doing two things. We're peaking at the center to create, still create an iconic bluff moment in the park, but then starting to let that taper down to the east and west, and even at the front, and letting, really, we're really trying to balance that green to gray ratio. And we think a little bit of gray in terms of creating that reference to the bluffs, and also, starting to, create some of the maintenance support structures and the restrooms that will be part of this park, can be housed in that. But then the rest is creating these more, these planes that come down to the ground. So you feel that you have this edge of green as a backdrop. And there's some other pieces to that, which I can show you here in this plan. Again, the ridge in the original plans was aligned alongside the Gardner's edge back here. But one of the things, and addressing some of the comments of having a diversity of play spaces and the commemorative courts possibly coming in and mixed use play spaces, was creating different pockets. So we turned the ridge in, which gives us a little bit more space to taper it down to 0 at the corners, and then creates different pockets of play on both the Lakeshore side and the Queens Keys side. And really creating, one of the things in our analysis was there was not a lot of large open lawn spaces along the waterfront. So we can create that space on the front here. As Adam said, there's the Toronto Water Shaft, which is more or less being located within this this shape, and we've located it at this point partially to embed some of the venting in the paving, but also here. And one of the things that you may have noticed in the elevation, though, is this shaft, after it's constructed, is 1.5 to 2 meters above the grade level. And what we're doing is we're crowning the site from 0 to that 2 meters down to 0, and likewise from this way, in order to, we think in some ways that does create an interesting experience in the park, but also it addresses this eventuality of the shaft being here and creating that kind of gently sloping lawn, which is at about 2 to 3% max through the park. We've been studying different topographic precedents from looking at Trillium Park and some of the elevations and components there, which are about 5 meters, and Brooklyn Bridge Park, which is doing similar things in terms of mitigating views of the highway, the BQE, and some of the unwanted noise and pollutants, which is at 10.5. And then even at Governor's Island, where the big mounds and hills, which are quite dramatic, but also quite wonderful as play surfaces and an experience for kids and adults alike in an urban environment, is quite wonderful. And that's at a 14 meter elevation. Again, this is the sort of conceptual grading that I had alluded to just a moment, that we're really kind of crowning the site up to that center to meet those constraints of the water shaft. And then looking at different views. And we've been articulating the surfaces quite a bit to try to find different experiences of this woodland walk to different overlooks looking back towards the lake. And then what we call the landslide, again, playing off the references of the bluffs that create this kind of urban amphitheater that looks at which will come up shortly at the gateway. Again, I talked about we're trying to maintain this idea of this green garden-like wall in the park and against the Gardner, and looking at these views, that we believe that this compromise of height against the wall for cost and use constraints really can be mitigated by the use of planting on both the surfaces and the trees to make up the elevation in those areas where the ridge isn't up at that height. Different sections showing the diversity of programs throughout the park. Where you can see here, we're at the peak of the ridge where you start to have opportunity for crossings through and restrooms and maintenance facilities, always having the lawn in the foreground. That's that landslide component that I talked about, where people can sit and look at people in the park playing on the lawn. And this is the Grove at the gateway. So this is right along Rees Street. And this is, previously we had that large overhang here, but we think, using trees and creating a space for flexible markets and other general seating area can be just as effective without that element. So again, part of things that we talked about in the competition was this green over gray, this adding landscape and program on the ridge. So the ridge is not just this buffer, it's also the program, it's also housing maintenance and restrooms, and it's also, you know, one of the primary experiences in the park. And how through the use of plantings and screening devices, we start to really mitigate the air and noise pollution, and working with our you know, both horticulture and acoustic consultants. This is the location of the shaft, which I think everyone's aware of how these shafts are, but then adding venting, you know, maybe on the vertical surfaces, something we'll be working with Toronto Water. So again, this was the competition element, and this is the right sizing is what we've been calling this exercise of bringing the ridge within the budget, and you know, I think at the end of the day, we also think it's a design improvement. So the different programs, you know, from, you know, different stages of you know, both from children to adults, we think there's a lot of spaces and different opportunities, from dog run to, you know, younger children play, to middle school play and swings, and, you know, the multi-surface courts, the basketball courts to commemorate the Raptors, and, you know, maybe handball against the back walls, like climbing walls in the back. We still are showing a small water scrim feature on the wall over here. It's been reduced in size. And then undersides of these are grander spaces, you know, that we do look at having these undersides that people can pass through, and they're not these, you know, dark spaces. So, you know, more detailed idea of program in the park, and the different types of programs that can happen on the lawn, and, you know, idea of which we'll see in some of the shots, you know, using the ridge as projection screen for events in the backside. There's the movie at night. And, you know, big open flexible lawn, I think, is something quite important, which will be important too for the phasing. The different passages from north to south being much more open than they were in the competition. The backside against Lakeshore, and, you know, we're conscious about creating, you know, buffers of planting and or fences to create, you know, safety between Lakeshore and these play spaces. And this idea of, you know, really, and Thomas will talk about the planting shortly, about creating these natural play spaces and exploration in the city, you know, according to this kind of bluff experience that you would only get if you were, you know, going outside of the city. So it's really trying to bring some of these wonderful endemic kind of conditions into the city. And then that Grove Gateway coming down Rees Street, where it kind of invites you in Moore Plaza. So looking at the different elevations, you know, we've been calibrating these further, and again, it's a two-faced elevation. We don't have a front and back side in our minds. That really the back side is highly programmed in terms of what those surfaces can be, from the restrooms and the park service facilities to passages and play spaces. There was a lot of talk of art programs, so there's a lot of moments and opportunities for different art programs. We'll continue to engage, and our partners, Brooke McElroy, are experts and have done a lot of work with Indigenous communities on placemaking, creating a lot of diversity in the park. So I'm going to give it over to Thomas, who's going to talk to you about some of the horticulture and maintenance strategies that we've been developing further.
Hi, good morning. We are super excited about the potential for horticulture to be a real transformative element in this park, creating a distinct environment on the waterfront. Right now, across the world, there really is a new way of thinking about parks, not just as places for sport courts and lawns, but as places where one can be immersed in robust natural environments, kind of the highline version of parks, right? And in the age of COVID, we know how important these places are. We see this space as a part of that vanguard. The cliff itself creates many specialized conditions where unique plant communities can thrive, plantings that are often not possible in traditional parks because of compaction and rich soils and other traditional images. Next slide, Mark. So like Mark had said, our starting point itself is your local bluff ecology. What's special about these bluffs is that they're sedimentary. It is a highly erodible bluffs. So in terms of plant communities, you get very distinct patterns between stable soil and loose soil. Next slide. So here you see some of these vegetative patterns. Some of the zones, like the one you see B, dynamic open cliffs, have dynamic open slopes from erosion, and many of the other ones are more stable. In addition to kind of this contrast between stable and erodible, there's also a beautiful gradient from dry to moist, windswept to sheltered, that we're really interested in from a design perspective. Next slide. What we love about these different plant communities is that each has a very different spatial quality. The upland forest is very open and fine textured, long views through stunted windswept trees. And at the opposite end of the gradient, the ravine-inspired environments are lush and sheltered, filled with broadleaf textures like ferns and spring ephemerals. Next slide. So we applied this gradient to the site in order to create a series of different planted environments, each of which evoke the feeling of their wild counterpart. Moist, rich zones at the lower elevations on the west end of the site. And as it steps up in elevation, you make your way up to the more gnarled, windswept vegetation at the highest points. Next image. So here are a few image boards of what this looks like. The highest elevations is visually very simple and clear. Repetition of a few dominant species is very important. And of course, we're thinking very much about salt spray from the gardener. So that becomes a very important filter for what plants make it into this zone. Next slide. And in many of the areas, we're very excited about having some open areas kind of mimicking the conditions of the erodible slopes. So here you see some plant environments that would have more shrubs and more open, colorful meadow planted environments. These include some of the bridges and some of the slopes that tilt itself toward the lawn. Next. Here you see a music, this is the Queen's Key Edge that introduces visitors to the kind of stylized naturalism of the project while keeping views of the water open. Next. A music woodland in kind of the mid layer. Next. And finally, the rich biodiverse carpet of the sheltered ravine forest. So many different experiences, all of them we want to be very open and clear, but going from very sheltered to very open. Because this is a public park and not a privately endowed highline, maintenance cannot be an afterthought. It really must be the driver of the design. So for each of the park's hard spots, we're already thinking of strategies to reduce inputs and to increase the resilience and stability of the plantings over time. As the design develops, we're happy to share more about each of these strategies and get into some of the details, but already this is an important part of shaping the plant palette, not just to mimic the wild, but to really to be a functional system that addresses some of the really hard conditions of this urban site. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. So another component is we understand during the competition, and it's still the case, there is this phase one component when the water shaft comes in. And as I had stated before, one of the ideas is really that if we can construct the ridge, and this is based on the kind of outline of Toronto Water had of what their siting would be for constructing that. So that's something that will continue to evolve, but we do think that can also be an interesting moment where people can look in and people can kind of have these kind of superintendent sidewalk clubs where they are looking through the construction fences. And then again, that it's just the lawn that becomes replaced and impacted in these different phases. Something we've also been really interested in as a change from the competition is creating this Queen's Key experience, which is slightly different than the park. It's more as kind of an intro. And it's, based on that elevation of raising up a couple meters at the center, that we do create an edge along here that is kind of a foreground, an intro to this bluff landscape, and also creates an interesting urban edge for seating, and as Thomas said, plant identifiable planting strategy too. Looking at, we've been starting to lay out restrooms and storage for underneath within the structure to, really kind of look at what are some nice spaces, safe spaces. We'll be looking at, same strategies that we had during the competition with lighting, that it's really the 3D elements create a lot of opportunities to create some really wonderful lighting strategies. And, this is kind of an update on from where we were in the competition, where we really have this gateway experience coming down Rees that invites you in and, introduces the bluff kind of, finishes or started, whichever way you want to look at it, at this point, and pulls you into this park experience. Playing with, how do we create and soften the walls in certain spaces and create these more inviting pass-throughs. A lot of work on circulation, I think in some ways is quite intuitive, but it's something we'll continue to study, especially with Lakeshore and looking at Rees. And we've been talking a lot with our structural engineers and geotech, and really starting to understand what part is, most of this would be, sloping landscapes that are of, plants and soils are in the ground. And then it's really the structure is, within this center area that gets, has the program under it, and another structure as it builds up. We're looking at piles and steel frame structure. Sustainability metrics will always be important through, and we're exploring a lot of different finishes and materials that tie into different materials existing throughout all the different waterfront projects, especially along Queens Quay. We think this can have its own identity, but at the same time, it should aesthetically and tastefully fit within the language of the waterfront, and just different furnishings and railings that we've been exploring. So really, I think we're not hiding the Gardner, but in a way we're trying to camouflage it and reduce its presence, and in doing so create a really beautiful park experience that it talks about the history of Toronto and the future at the same time. Thank you.
Okay, does that conclude the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Very comprehensive. We're going to move to questions first, and then we'll go to comments. And I just want to start off with one question. I walked by the site a couple of days ago, and the western half of the parking lot has blue hoarding all around it. Do you know what's going on there now?
This is Adam. I can actually speak to that. So that is, they're building a separate tunnel underneath as part of the N-Wave system to Toronto Island. So it's mostly below ground infrastructure that they're putting, and there'll be one small manhole at the surface. But that's a separate tunnel and shaft project.
Okay, so it's nothing to do with the other shaft.
Correct. They're two separate.
All right. Okay, I'll go to the panel, and we'll go for questions, and let's go down the list. If you have a question, please speak.
Paul, can
yeah.
I just interrupt? I think somebody was going to introduce the park's staff. I don't know if
I'm sorry.
or Adam wants to do that.
Are they there?
No, I think they just didn't do it.
I'm happy to do that. Or Tammy, do you want to introduce? Why don't I just do it? So we have two, I believe there's two representatives from Parks on the call. There is Lori Ellis from, who's been working with us actively on this project and on the York Street project and on Jack Layton Ferry Terminal for years. And Alex Mutt is also on the call representing, oh God, I'm never going to get this acronym right. Alex, you can just tell us which department in Parks as acting manager there. I don't know if
Planning, Design, and Capital Project.
Thanks, Tammy. I never get that acronym right. Thank you.
Okay, is that anyone else? Okay, thanks a lot. All right, so I'll just go down the list for questions. And again, as we'll start off with Betsy, and I'll follow the order here.
Thanks, Paul. My question is kind of questioning your attachment to the large concrete wall, because it is such a departure from the competition scheme. I was actually a little bit surprised to see it being so prominent. I know that in your renderings, you're optimistically draping and growing things over the top of it, which I think you can have some success with in Toronto, maybe not as optimistic as you've shown. It's more be about planting in front of it. But it really does seem to be a large amount of concrete that's fronting the gardener, and especially I'm not sure it's the right move where you've gone from your initial scheme. So I just need to hear a little bit more about why you've made this decision and your commitment to it and the openness to maybe looking at another way to handle this area.
Sure. I think one of the it's the big challenge, and I think it's something we've been really struggling to do is minimize the one is cost is a big player, and two is finding that balance of how much of the gardener do you screen, and in the competition it was kind of creating a full edge screening. The other part of it though was also that there was some slopes in the competition that I think we had some comments on that, you know, would be quite a lot of switchback coming up, and there was some discomfort with people being up on that part of the gardener with no way down. So it's kind of balancing not having a lot of unusable or challenging slopes. So kind of that's where it starts to taper down. I do think along the lines of what you're talking about, we have been, even since submitting these slides, still looking at how to reduce the amount of concrete, especially on the waterfront side, and create more of those sloping pieces. So, you know, still at the same time that we're reducing, I'll just go to the,
I'll throw a follow-up while you're, the follow-up
Sure.
would be, how are you negotiating, like if, clearly you could make the slope more shallow by pulling it into the lawn, it will then take some of the lawn away, but isn't the big idea the slope as opposed to flat in a wall?
it's a little, there's a bit more slope emerging. I think the bluff was always kind of the bluff as this ridge that kind of you know, mitigates against all those things, against visual, sound and air, against the gardener. I think we're allowing this balance between now this tree layer of hiding some of that. I do think, you know, in this image, which shows it all is green, I think we'd like to get as much as possible to that. We don't mind if there's a little bit of bluff and gray that shows, but your point is well taken, and is something we are continuing to explore of what that right balance is between like trying more strategies like we're doing right here. And this would be very easy to do that here, like just to tilt that down more. I think tilting this and sloping this into the lawn, there's challenges with the water shaft and phasing that we'd have to get around, but certainly as we move towards the west, we can, and that's what we've, you know, a couple of weeks ago, the ridge went even further, was more gray in the front. So we're slowly letting the plants in the slopes take that up, but it's something we'll continue to look at.
Mark, this is Thomas too. Just one thing to add to that is, I think one of the questions we ask ourselves a lot in looking at the bluffs was what makes the bluffs iconic? And it really is the contrast of the sheer face to the vegetated surface. You know, if these all became 100% green backgrounds, I think it loses some of its iconography and reference to the piece. So I think there is, while everything Mark's saying about kind of reducing the face of that, I think it is important to preserve some of it, especially in the center, in order to kind of make that reference strong and in a very modern, interpreted way.
Okay, Betsy, any other questions? Okay, I'll go to George.
Am I muted? Where am I? Yes, no, I'm not.
Oh, we can hear you, George.
All right, thank you. I'm still a bit puzzled about the water shaft. Adam Novak's introductory slides, there was a reference in the text to the possibility of a low building in conjunction with the stormwater shaft. And I'm curious to know if the design you've shown us is addressing that with this sloping lawn going up to the 2-meter height, which I take it is the height. The top of the shaft will be above the ground plane datum. So does that strategy of yours and eliminate the need for the possible low building, quote unquote? And just as a related question, there's also reference in the text to the water tunnel, but I'm unaware of it, where it is, what its relationship to the shaft is, and if any impacts on the design that might have. So questions, answers to those questions would be helpful.
So yes, the water tunnel is in between, these lines.
Is that the big curve?
Yes.
Okay.
So that has some flexibility. There's a certain radius and range that their boring machine can go in, and there's a range of where that. So it could curve up here. It could curve up here, but it can't go any further outside of. It has to hit this shape. This is the shape that they've given. So that has to hit at some point along that curve. So the range of the water tunnel is somewhere in this lawn area. The other part is the vents and the height of the shaft above ground is what the 2 meters of the sloping takes up. Any additional venting or buildings that we're still getting clarity on, we're hoping can take place within the ridge structure.
So in short, you're expecting that the slope will obviate the need for the so-called low building.
We're hoping that the slope takes up the elevation of the shaft above the grade. The ridge structure itself would take in a building if an additional building is needed.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, George. Claude, are you back now?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I just have a kind of a bigger question in terms of the phasing. I understand that the ridge is phase 1, correct?
Correct.
And the sidewalk in front of it will also be maybe the kind of an in-between zone that's going to be built and demolished in order to make sure that the shaft is going to take place, correct?
Correct.
And you're going to do the rough and final grading for phase 1B because they're going to come in later to excavate and do their work and go back and pitch to finish the kind of a meeting your grade at the finished ridge level.
Correct.
Correct? Are you doing also the Rees streetscape in the phase 1 or not, where you have the double rows of trees?
We would like to. I think that's going to be come out of very detailed discussions once we're engaged with Toronto Water. I mean, we've interpreted their staging ground a little bit, but it's more or less the same area of space. But I think once they start, indicating where they're placing cranes and everything within this, we're hoping that if we can consolidate it as much as possible within this quadrant, that we do construct the bones of the Queen's Quay piece too.
So in relation to George's question, if there's a building coming in, you will have to know in phase 1A to have the room for it under the ridge. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a building in front of the ridge, correct?
Correct.
Okay. When are you planning to start a couple of years construction down the road? I guess. Adam, maybe?
Yep.
Yeah, I think Waterfront Toronto should jump in. Adam, do you want to?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we're planning like sometime in the mid to early 2020s, potentially like around 2022, we would start phase 1. And then the stormwater shaft, it's not confirmed yet, but they're talking like the late 2020s. They would build their shaft. So that there is a pretty big gap between the two.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, Peter.
Yeah, just a supplementary question on this shaft. What's the top of the shaft? Is it a vent or is it covered with the landscape? And second question is, what's the material of the concrete walls? Is it nice concrete like Tadeo Ando, or is it going to be, because of budget restrictions, just shotcrete? I just like to hear that description.
Good questions. I think the idea, as we understand it, some of the shafts can be buried and covered. It's the only thing there's a few. There's not just one. There's several vents on top, and those grates would have to be at the surface. We're trying to align those in a way that they're in the pavement and not in the lawn, but that's going to be, again, coming out of the detailed design exercises with Toronto Water's designers. The second question is, we do a lot of architectural concrete at Y. That's the goal. I think budget will be the driver there. So those are the two options we have been talking about, are an architectural concrete, but some of the shotcrete can be quite beautiful and elegantly detailed. So that's not off the table, and it is another option we've been discussing.
Okay.
So sorry that we haven't decided yet is the answer.
Okay, anything else, Peter?
Yeah, one last question. Did you study the acoustic impact of lowering the top of the ridge? Obviously, one of the considerations is to reduce, if you kept it up there, would be significantly reduce the automobile traffic noise. You've kind of replaced the height of the ridge with dense trees, but trees don't stop traffic noise. Have you conducted an acoustic evaluation of the space as a result of lowering?
We haven't done the acoustics of the lowering yet. We had the initial acoustics from the competition, which were in a way they're somewhat intuitive, that the center piece becomes a bit quieter, and as you got to the edges, the noise starts to pick up. I think it's something that we will be doing as we get into schematics, and probably even in this pre-design phase, we'll be revisiting the acoustic analysis.
Okay, thanks. Bridget.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I had a question about winter planting. We're at 43 degrees latitude, and I guess just the kind of issue of really thinking about the seasonal aspect of the plant material. I mean, I really appreciated the study of the ridge and all that, but I guess I would love to really see the kind of, in future presentations, the winter dimension. I had another question about whether you have the most updated plans of the building on the east side of the Peter Street Basin, because in a way, just to understand how we ensure connectivity, because we've seen presentations of that project over the last several months ago, and I guess I just wondered whether you have been given by Waterfront Toronto the most updated information.
We've talked about we haven't seen all the most recent plans, but we have been talking about some of the connections that would be a result that was uncertain at the competition because we knew those were coming online. I think that's something we'll definitely be interested to see how the east side connects in.
Right. And then I guess there was mention in the kind of description of items about mock-ups. And is that something that is part of your process, and what stage or when does that happen?
That's a good question. I think usually we do mock-ups in, I don't know, in construction documents, but I think there may be the need, you know, in design development probably to lock down and be clear on that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Thomas, did you want to address the winter planting?
I just to say that I think those are excellent points, and we 100% agree and think you know, really, because you have such long winter, showing what this planting looks like in winter is an important part of the design considerations here, and we'll make sure we do that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Fatty?
Hello. Thank you for your presentation. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I have two questions. One is a follow-up on Bridget, but one shorter question up front, which is about how high is the Rees lawn at the highest point of Queens Quay at this moment? Is there, I noticed that there's a little bit of a kind of a concrete little curb, and then the lawn itself is raised off Queens Quay.
2 meters.
2 meters. That's at the highest point. Okay.
Yeah.
And is there any need, would you know, about kind of putting some kind of you know, fall protection or other kinds of other accessibility issues that might, you know, have an impact on this edge, since it's a highly pedestrian and very active sidewalk?
Yes, and I think that's something in looking at the planting strategies along that edge. It's something that I think we know just as much as there would be on the ridge. There would be, you know, places where we would have, you know, whether it's mesh rail or other fall protection, we'd have to embed that into those areas.
Maybe I'll just expand on that in the comments too, but I think that's really important because you'll see how the wave decks themselves, who are way less, you know, dangerous, if you will, have had to recompromise their designs in some ways to accessibility. Anyways, my second comment is actually expands a little bit more on Bridget's question about the winter, because not just the vegetation palette itself, but I've noticed that you don't have a single diagram or even a single rendering for the 5 months of the year when you don't actually see the green on top of the gray, when it's all gray on gray across the whole space. And I'm wondering, not just from a planting perspective, but from a programmatic one, from an accessibility, circulation, snow load, ice load, you know, some things that might actually have a huge impact on the design of not just the park itself, but the last thing you would want is to end up having half of the place be inaccessible and roped up and closed up during the months of the year when, you know, just, you know, actually Toronto's starting to get more ice and slippery surfaces than snow, because snow would be even safer. So I'm wondering if you might have this material somewhere, but it just didn't make it on your presentation deck.
It's a great point, and I think it was something that was very prevalent in the competition entry, where you know, we were very conscious of, and I mean, as landscape, we believe all seasons, dead, alive, you know, winter, summer is quite beautiful. I think it's something the programming is very much being considered for winter months, and I think it's a great point to illustrate that. We didn't update some of that stuff from the competition entry, but thank you.
Paul,
yeah.
I feel we may be veering a bit into comments. And maybe we should either curtail the questions and move to comments, or try to finish up the comments section so we don't go too far over time.
Yeah, no, that's fair warning. So with that in mind, are there burning questions that other panel members have that have not been already asked?
Yes, please.
Paul, Paul, I just have one about the budget, if you don't mind.
Yeah, who is that? Sorry.
It's Jana, sorry, it's Jana.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So Adam mentioned that the budget's been reduced from 10 million to 6 million for phase one only. So my question is the 4 million remaining part of phase two, is the stormwater shaft part of the hard cost construction, or has there been an overall reduction to the budget of the park?
Okay. Mark,
Hi.
who's going to answer that one?
I can answer it.
Yeah.
It's Natami. So the Parks, Forestry, and Recreation's budget for the construction of the park improvements has been overall reduced. So we have a phase one, which is everything that you see here, budget that is $6 million, and that's the design to construction budget. So it doesn't include soft costs and contingencies and stuff. So that and that was just a reduction. So the cost of the shaft and its make good project will be in addition to, it is a separate project and it will make good on the proposal. And we are working in concert with the detailed design of the shaft to the extent that we possibly can, so that we reduce throwaway costs and we have as much efficiency in construction as possible. But essentially, for the foreseeable future, the value of park improvements in this park for phase one, which is everything other than the white area, is 6 million.
Okay, thanks. I see Pat has a question next.
Yeah, I was just, what kind of costing has been done on the designs so far to date? Like a class D, a class C? What kind of information do you have?
We received I would say an order of magnitude class D estimate for as part of the construction, or as part of the competition submission, and it was evaluated by a third-party cost consultant. However, I think we haven't gotten to the point of looking very carefully at the value of the consensus design, but we intend to as part of this phase of design.
So the competition cost estimate, sort of order of magnitude, was based on the larger value for the park, the 10 million?
Yes.
Okay, correct.
Okay, Eric has a question.
Yes, very quick question. I was just looking between the original proposal and the updated proposal currently. In the original one, there was a lot of, I would say, kids' activities that look at the slope and how to navigate. There were slides, lots of different point of interaction that was facilitated by the slope. How much of that was preserved in the new? I don't see quite as much in the new revised proposal, or it's a bit hard to understand how much of the dimension is maintained in the existing proposal, in the current proposal.
In terms of the usable spaces?
Or in terms of the, so if you look, so yes, in terms of, for example, are they slides? Are they things that, kids can go up and down easily, that they can, because the original proposal had a lot of that.
Yes.
This one seems to maybe have pulled back a little bit. So I just want to understand where are those pulled back?
I think we're trying to maintain kind of the same proportion of use of active play spaces on the ridge itself. I think the primary difference in terms of the layout structure is really pulling this end of the ridge up, down towards the south, and creating additional play space on the backside. So I think in the competition there was an area of play that was here, and which is still there. It's on the ridge now, and then we kind of push some of the more active play, with the ball sports over onto the backside of the ridge. So the intent is to have the same amount of programmatic opportunities and playground equipment and swings and slides, and how that, that's some of the exercises we're starting now, is how those integrate into that ridge structure. And I think it's getting the ridge itself right before fully, designing those elements in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else have any other burning questions? Otherwise, we're going to move to comments.
I wouldn't mind asking a really quick question, if that's okay. Kevin here.
Kevin, yeah.
One of the slides, I think 77, said that there was going to be net zero metering. Is that referring to net zero energy? Is that the intent behind the small building portion?
It's a goal. We haven't gotten to that point yet, though. Yes.
Oh, okay. I mean, okay, we can address more in the comments. Thanks kindly.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it.
All right. Thank you very much. So let's move to comments, and I'll go back to Betsy to lead off.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. I appreciate the team's commitment to the Bluffs reference. Honestly, I'm not sure if you had presented this extent of concrete wall in the competition proposal that you would be sitting here today. I think there was some magic to the green wall offsetting, interrupting the gardener, and then kind of being the base for this iconic image of the Toronto skyline. I would suggest that moving forward, you look at recalibrating the slope relative to the amount of concrete you have there, connecting the lawn to the ridge in a way that makes the lawn a conceptual piece of the entire project, as opposed to an island that's currently ringed by a concrete walkway adjacent to the concrete wall of the ridge and the public sidewalk. Trillium Park, which was one of your examples in the proposal in this presentation, we were at the summer with an outside office, summer event, and the part that we were sitting in has a lawn with a shelter built on it, which was completely empty during the summer. Every single person in the park that entire afternoon was on the adjacent slope where there were fairly small trees, because they're still growing in, and rocks to sit on. So I'd prefer that the lawn became part of this slope idea, as opposed to feeling like the empty space in front. I know there are significant challenges with the shaft, and so I appreciate that those are going to be essentially blank spots in the project. But right now there's real disconnection between these two pieces, and I think to make a full park, they should be tied together. I don't really understand from this presentation what the gardener's side experience is. We've seen it in snippets, but I think we could see an elevation and potentially more rendering so that we really understand that piece. And that also what the fencing and lighting components are for safety on both sides. Fadi touched on it initially a little bit. I think the last piece is just about the elevation. I completely accept that if you can grow trees on top, the entire project can come down to a certain extent, and the trees can take up that upper portion of the gardener kind of coverage, let's call it. I know that Claude will start to weigh in on the amount of soil that you have to grow these trees, because he really is the expert in our panel on that. So I will leave that as my comments, and can't wait to see this project being developed more. Thank you for the presentation. It was great.
Thank you, Betsy. George?
Okay, thank you, Paul. Well, I'm going to express two general senses of unease about the state of this project. The first one has to do with the relationship of the comments about the competition design, which Adam went through in his preliminary presentation, in relation to the revised scheme that we've been shown today. And it seems to me that there's I'm sensing a kind of latent conflict here between trying to preserve the basic idea of the competition design, which is the Bluffs idea that Betsy was just talking about, and trying to defer to all these issues about the need for open lawn, not closing off the Gardner too much. I have an uneasy feeling that the design team is kind of sort of caught in a kind of conflict, and that responding to all those comments whilst preserving the basic idea of the design, well, it's certainly not going to be easy, and there's some question in my mind at the end of the day whether it's actually going to be possible. So that's my first flagged unease. The second one has to do with the phasing, because I have a kind of very uneasy, and this intersects, by the way, with what Betsy was just saying. I have an uneasy feeling that going ahead with the phase one as described before the stormwater shaft is further along in its work is really risky, and that there's a kind of problematic downside risk of the kind of the degree of integration between the visible elements associated with the stormwater shaft and the design concept being shown coming apart. So, and if I understood the schedule, the construction schedule, it seemed to me that the gap between the two was not so huge that there might be some wisdom in slowing down the phase one, so that at least the design part of the stormwater shaft was more completed, so that the odds of the integration that you are trying to achieve would have a higher possibility of success. And if you go ahead without that, I think you're really out on a dangerous limb.
Okay, thanks, George. Peter.
Yeah, I'm not going to offer many comments around Betsy's commentary, as I agree with pretty well everything she said. I also share George's unease with the current forces pulling the design in different directions and perhaps resulting in unfavorable compromises. I question the whole bluff idea. A shotcrete concrete wall is not the bluffs. And in support of what Betsy says, the horticultural presentation as part of this overall presentation we saw was the most delightful part. The planting and tree species and thought that went into that part of the presentation was magnificent, and it's what we need in parks. So let's go back to a beautiful green wall kind of concept, or green hillside with patches of beautiful horticulture and access to nature, as well as the places where people can rest and enjoy shade from trees. And that south-facing shotcrete wall is going to be hot, hot, hot all summer long, and it's not going to go well with the users. My final concern is again about acoustics. I don't think Torontonians are as aware as I am how noisy that damn thing is, and I go to parks to enjoy nature and birds and butterflies and trees and plants and peace and peace. You need to get the hillside up higher, at least in some areas, so that we can enjoy quiet. And at the sacrifice of some views from cars and on the Gardner speeding by, not being able to see the water, so what? Get out of your cars and get into the park and enjoy the water, and get the hill higher, and prove to me that there are acoustic pockets of acoustic silence in your next level of solution. Those are my comments, Paul.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Bridget? Bridget, are you there? No, maybe not. How about Fatty?
Bridget,
Fatty, are you there?
hello, I'm here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. We missed Bridget. I don't know whether she's still with us or not.
She's
but-
still here. I
right.
think it's hard to unmute, so I
All right.
sympathize.
Well, you're here, so why don't you go ahead and I'll go back to Bridget.
Sure. I'll keep my comments brief since I hogged some time in the questions. I'm sorry about that. I just wanted to mention that I think the project is very exciting and a super important one. And I feel like maybe some of the pushback is about trying to find the most ideal and optimal way to deal with this. I think one of the things that might clarify and help clarify from a conceptual level is if you're treating this park as a park or as an urban plaza or piazza, and somehow it's sitting in between. I sympathize about the surrounding hardscape. You know, this is constructed ground. We heard it's polluted. It's surrounded by highways. It's a parking lot. And, you know, in many ways, the kind of schism between this being a park where you're in nature or surrounded by nature versus in a kind of urban hardscape plaza where you might be offering some greenery is something that could help refine and define this a little bit clearer. And I'm not saying that these could not be both, but I agree in the sense that you know, Peter's comments about the vegetation strategy was by far the most interesting and more robust because it had a clear guiding principle and a clear sort of a clear guiding set of parameters that guided where the planting go. And I would love to understand your bluffs and the kind of elevated structures as having the same amount of clarity. So when needed to kind of block certain elements or act as a kind of container of the shape, then the geometries of these sort of zigzagging walls might be represented in a way that actually seems to be just as logical as the vegetation strategy. And at the moment, I just find it a little bit random. So in that sense, it's a little hard to understand where and why and how the wall is where it is and how it is other than a kind of an expression of an interpretation of what the bluffs are. Lastly, I just wanted to, you know, mention that I think the idea of some of these walls are really wonderful, and I would consider where and how the materials of those things would be. So if you think of Teardrop Park by MVVA and New York City, which is a much smaller wall, in itself has a kind of living dynamic to it where the water might be trickling down. It freezes at different times of the year, and it's surrounded by a lot of greenery. So in some moments when you have a wall like this that is creating a microclimate and a type of experience that has a very direct relationship to vegetation, to wind, to temperature, to light, I'm in support of that. So I'm not saying everything needs to be a green permeable surface when we know this place is completely constructed and a hardscape in the first place, but that the walls and the green need to work together and not be one on top of each other. So taking cue from some of the vegetation strategies that were super clear and really compelling, and treating the programmatic and hardscape elements of the park as with the same amount of clarity. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go back to Bridget. Are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I had a hard time unmuting. My mouse died. So thank you. So first of all, I think what's so key about this sort of parking lot site is that it's one of the last remaining park sites in this part of the waterfront. And I think that it's a strong design concept that was, you know, awarded the kind of winning competition. And it really needs this nuanced response to all of these kind of particular conditions that it abuts up against, which I think is the strength of the scheme. So I feel like the relationship to the gardener, which you showed in your competition drawings, needs to be deliberately artificial. So you're not trying to kind of make a double-sided ridge. It's like the back side is actually deliberately not it's a different kind of construction. And there was one photo where you saw almost like a metal piece projected out that was really expressing the contrast of the sort of front side towards the waterfront in relation to the back side. So you're almost looking like at the back side of a billboard or something. And I kind of like that contrast, which I guess I didn't really see very much in the further development of the scheme. I also think that the project would really benefit from serious sections through it, I think the image that we're looking at right now is slightly, almost like a slightly different project than the one that was presented in the competition. And I feel like the two need to merge together. And I think that mock-ups would be really helpful, all of the kind of budget analysis, because in a way it really needs to be a kind of robust response to this kind of very complicated park site. I feel really strongly that the winter dimension has to be really understood. It's a really long season, and that while I appreciated so much about the plant presentation, it's got to kind of address 6 months of the year, and if it does that, it'll be super successful. It's also really, Peter talked about the acoustics, but I also think the wind is a really important part of this site, and in a way, you need to be mitigating against that and creating nooks and crannies that people can actually sit in February on a sunny day, protected from the wind. So I just need to kind of understand that more in your future presentations. And then I do think that I really feel that a strong link between the Peter Street Basin and this park is essential, and that you're doing it really only through the sidewalk. There's some very complicated level changes between the water level, the kind of bridge over, the kind of, and so I feel like there should also be a connection mid-block. My understanding from the quadrangle presentations is there's a kind of east-west connection from that driveway wrapping around that whole site into this complex and down into the waters level. There's a lot of grade changes there, and I feel like for the success of this, the routes through, you need to really capitalize on that mid-block east-west connection through, so that people can move from the Peter Street Basin to the park and vice versa really easily and smoothly to really have a different way of moving through the site. And but I feel like there's a lot of work to be done, but I appreciate the concept, and I guess I feel like I hope we don't lose the kind of idea of this constructed or modern ridge while it goes through all these other phases of development. Because in a way, this looks more like a kind of, the image we're looking at looks more like a kind of concrete abutment with a bunch of planting kind of hanging over, as opposed to this kind of constructed idea of the ridge. So there's a kind of, it's a challenge, but I feel like the competition idea was really strong and really appropriate, and then it needs to make sure it doesn't get lost in the kind of further development. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Bridget. I'll just keep going down the list. Is Nina Marie with us now? Or
I don't think so.
No? Okay, thanks. Eric.
Thank you, Paul. So I'll echo. I won't repeat some of the comments, but I do echo my colleagues. I think that there's a strong idea here, but I think some of it, since the competition, I do feel that it's been some of that that refined the texture, the green, the slope has been lost. And so I think that looking at some of the original intent is quite important. One of the things that's been, and this is an image that's actually quite good to look at. I do agree with my colleagues that the wall of concrete to me is problematic. We have the concrete of the gardener on the back that we don't see now, but we replace it with another kind of concrete, sets of concrete wall, and I'm very not at unease about that kind of texture. I think that the texture, looking at how we could have it having more slope, more green, that instead of concrete, could it be a different, large stone? Could it be something that is actually more natural, that actually feels less as a rigid construct? I think would be, to me, is something that's quite a more natural feel, more natural texture is quite important. And I like your rendering on page 27, where you see it's much softer. There's planting on the lower parts. one thing that I would like to I think that the lower part, I understand that there's a future phase at the where the construction of the water tank is going to be, but the lawn, I like the idea of a lawn, and that I think that the ridge and the lawn should have that better integration, as was mentioned earlier. But what is the future planting along this? Like, are they along the paths? Are they going to be, even if it's done in a next phase? There's a little bit on your illustration contradiction, or it's not consistent between what is the long-term planting along Queen's Quay versus are there any planting along the path. So I think understanding the phase 2 planting is like also quite critical. I would like to also understand. I think it would be great to have a landscape plan that shows how, and this is building on Brigitte's comment about how does the park integrates with all the future element, the streetscape along Queen Street, the south side at the HCO Park, the Peter Street Basin. I don't quite understand how the park is also relates to the quadrangle buildings to the west. So those are quite key that I found are understanding that big picture and how it relates to the rest of the public realm around is currently missing. Also, one element that I like with the first scheme is that dimension of that the slope can be part of those kids' activities, and I found that that has been lost in this part of the scheme. And I think that when we talked about the seasonality of the park, looking at how these slope and how the activities, the kids' playground it can be actually used and built upon, that actually be something that I think needs to continue to evolve. The maintenance too, to me, would be quite a critical. With all these slopes, all these pathway that goes up. So understanding that how you maintain these, is it when it rains, when there's ice, when the snow is melting, how you deal with that is quite critical, because that is obviously will actually have a huge impact on the usability of that ridge. And the other thing is, to me, is the fencing. I think I found that the fencing on this scheme and how the fences are going to be integrated as will have a huge impact on the image of the place. Where are they located? Because there's obviously going to be a lot of them. What's the quality of it? What's the detail of it? How does it work? Is it sometime further away from the edge so you can let the vegetation grow? And the same thing along Queen's Quay. There are some images, for example, on page, and Fadi mentioned that on page 68, for example, where you could tell there's quite significant change in level around Queen's Quay. So how do we deal with this level? Can we actually have a smoother integration of the, you probably, having fences along all the edges between the public realm of Queen's Quay and the park, I think needs to be carefully addressed. You want this to be fairly inviting, fairly welcoming, very accessible. So something to continue to explore. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Jana? Are you there, Jana?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to unmute. So thanks for a great presentation. I was on the jury that helped select this, so it's really great to see it coming to fruition as a real project. I'm not going to repeat what my colleague said. I agree 100% with the comments about the amount of concrete and the idea about the ridge and the kind of dissonance between the submission for the for the competition and then also the what we're seeing here today. Although I also think, as Fadi was saying, that there's a lot of great potential here, and I think it's really a process of unwinding it all. And I think George's discussion about a kind of uneasiness, I think, is really right on in terms of being caught somewhere at the moment. A couple of things, though, that haven't been mentioned, I think, in the mix when we see this the next time. One is the location of the basketball courts on the north side of the site. I think there's a fundamental challenge there. Putting the ball courts, you know, they're things that need to be fenced in anyway if they're going to stop people and balls running or entering onto the road. That then create sort of big, you know, obstacles along the street, and they're hard up against the backside of the wall, or what feels like the backside of the wall, which in and of itself is an issue. And then it stops people from gathering around to watch a really good game. So I actually would suggest that you might want to rethink the location of those and bring that into the actual south side of the scheme as one of the activities, as opposed to just having a kind of button-down lawn space for the entire front elevation. Just a small note, when you showed the washrooms and the office plan layout, I think in public spaces, it's always a great idea to have no dead-end corridors. And as you've drawn it now, someone can get trapped in that dead end going to the washroom. So it'd be good to rethink that. I think, as Bridget was saying about other drawing conventions to explore this idea, I'm finding it very difficult to understand the scheme as a whole because of the episodic nature that are of the drawings that are not actually like laid out in a kind of empirical or rational manner that takes you from A to B and C, so you can connect the dots as you walk around the site. And I wonder whether, you know, even bringing it into Grasshopper might also not only allow you to explore this more, but actually allow you to tune and get a more nuanced response to not only the sculptural effects of the ridge, but its relationship and space making in a three-dimensional manner. And it would certainly help to have some kind of video or walkthrough around, because to me, one of the issues I still have no real good understanding of yet is the two kind of cuts that are still tunnel-like to me. I mean, you're saying that they're not, and they obviously seem larger at this point, but the quality of that space to me still feels tunnel-like. And so next time it would be great to see drawings that actually substantiate your idea that you've eliminated that issue. And then finally, I have to say, I feel that with the reduction to the project hard cost construction for phase one, I have a real concern about if it's feasible to get all of this in phase one. And if so, what will that do to the quality of the work in order to get the extent of the work? Thanks very much.
Thanks, Janet. I see now we're joined by Nina Marie. Welcome. You have comments, Nina Marie? Yeah, I think you're muted.
I'm not able to. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, we're just having some technical difficulties, so I'll make this very brief. I've actually been with you for a while, but not able to contribute, so my apologies for whatever is causing that. I echo all of the comments that I've heard so far. I would particularly like to reinforce both thanks for the presentation for a competition that's very important on a critical site, and one that, as Bridget said, really needs some nuance. And I just want to be on the record to say thank you for that. And yes, the link between the vegetation superstructure and the shotcrete is really where I think energy needs to be placed, so that this construction is realized in its true potential, both as, yes, an important and lush park of respite and rest and occupation in the city in the way that a piazza or plaza is, but that the urban heat island heat sink is not exacerbated, and that the vegetation is really allowed to do its job in terms of cooling and public space. Most of the other comments have already been made, so I'll leave it at that, and thank you for bearing with me to be heard.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
You're welcome. I think Pat is next.
Yeah, I think actually such great comments from my colleagues. So I won't add to that. I do think it is a strong scheme, and I agree with the amount of concrete. But just a word of warning. I think there's a budget is a real concern on this project, and I think that I mean, it's great to win a competition and then say, oh, but by the way, your budget's been mostly cut in half. Is really tough. So I appreciate the position that you're in here. I think you might find, though, that you actually kind of conforming to working with that $6 million will yield something that's considerably different than what you're proposing right now. I honestly don't see my gut just tells me this is not affordable. Cast in place concrete is expensive. It's not reliable in Toronto, by the way. So I would caution you against that. I would also suggest that, embedding the building into a large berm seems like there's some savings, some savings there, but not really, because you've got to deal with the kind of constructability of something that has got, mounds of soil on top of it, and sort of a waterproofing, insulating, all of that goes with a structure like that is considerable. So, and then when I see, I guess phase 2 is all of the retaining walls along Queens Quay, but there's a lot of money, there's a lot of construction money in those walls. So I really think that, the height of the structure, the amount that's exposed is something that you will kind of be driven to take a look at just as you try to get this design within the kind of budget that you've been presented with. Thanks.
Thanks, Pat. Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts. I definitely think this is it's a really interesting project, and I completely understand the appeal through the design competition process, why this was selected, and it's a sexy concept. But the more time I sort of think about it, particularly with budget constraints, you just get stuck on the idea that it's really just trying to do too many different things. And in particular with this location, we always talk about sort of a lack of green space downtown per capita, but there are a lot of parks around here. And I feel like if we're not looking at this as part of a portfolio of parks and really understanding how they all fit together, and we're not really understanding how to best use this site. And in particular, sort of the meandering trail along the top of the escarpment. I mean, we're a block away from the music garden, which has a similar sort of function, sort of a path that goes nowhere through gardens. The idea that there's no lawns nearby, but we're right across the street from HTO Park, which is functionally best sort of lawns and beach, a place to sort of hang out, hopefully get some sun. So there are, there's a lot of activities here that I'm not sure, really add a ton. And so first of all, I'd like to just see this park. It really is part of HTO Park. And then, really think about what's missing. And I know things like dog runs are definitely lacking down at the waterfront. But the slope in particular, I think offers a specifically unique opportunity for people to see the water. And thinking about some of my favorite parks around the world, places like Parc Chaumont in Paris, people just sit on the hillside in the sunshine. It doesn't have to be sort of overly engineered. I think would provide a huge opportunity just for an interesting, useful space where people can actually see the water over Queens Quay, which you don't get to see. 100% agree with Janet. The basketball courts, and anyone who knows me in person would probably not be surprised that I played a lot of basketball. But I think I think one, it's just going to be a really, really uncomfortable location, close to the highway, loud, bad air quality, that adjacent to both roads, and really hidden away. And I think particularly if you're talking about showcasing sport, and it is in a bit of a sports corridor with the Rogers Center right there, bringing that out, much like maybe the basketball court at Christie Pitts, where people are sort of sitting on the hillside, they're watching a game. those are really important opportunities. I encourage, connecting as well, maybe with some of the communities that play basketball. And there's a pretty big one down at Bathurst in Queens Quay about what would be usable and interesting. I think would be a valuable activity as well. But pull those forward, make them part of the experience. Do a little bit less with the whole site overall. And I think I think it's a good space. It's going to be very different because it's high traffic. So I think you want to make it an animated space with lots going on. And then, moving south towards the water, it gets a little more tranquil, a little more private.
Okay, I don't know what that interference is there. We have Kevin still left.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the presentation. I think this is going to be a beautiful and very important project. One thing I just wanted to say that when you mentioned that the little building there will be net zero energy, it gets me excited. I think you should always pursue that. It can be actually, relative to other buildings, a very easy little building to make, very high performance, super insulated, doesn't need a lot of service. If you are going to do net zero energy, you need some on-site renewables. I would just encourage you to consider that that's also, or it could be, a very important landscape element. So, that if you do need to generate some solar heat or solar electricity, that should be part of, the overall, set of motifs or insertions in the design. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I think we've got everyone.
No, Paul, you forgot.
We missed Claude.
Yes.
Oh, Claude, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
How can I forget you?
That's okay. So, Mark and Steve, welcome to Toronto Waterfront. It's a big playground. You're going to learn a lot from it. It's a wonderful place. I'd like just to provide few comments and few advice by the fact that we are completing Love Park at York Street. We are at 90%. And of course, the budget is the big thing that is above your head. And I think the battle that is facing you is to make sure that the clarity of the idea is very clear. And as you see, people want it. It needs to be maintained. And making sure that where you're going with your schematic design and design development, allow for flexibility and strategy for things to move and adapt. The reference of the ridge is great. I think you have the support on that. I think the evolution that you've done from the competition to now is in the right direction. As Betsy was saying at the beginning, maybe it's still not there, but I like the intriguing aspect that the Gardner Expressway still exists in the back, and it will not disappear. And having it peeking into the park, I think it's great and honest. I would go back and look at your reference of topography that you presented, because they're all soft, less constructed than what your project is. And maybe there's a kind of those elements that could be brought in. The first project that came in my mind when I saw your project, I thought of Lawrence Halprin in the 60s with this beautiful constructed modern, that what Bridget was talking about, which is a kind of their beautiful precedent as well that could be used. Do we need to get all the people in that length throughout the whole ridge? Question mark. The notion of green wall, as you propose, I would say way too sensitive. I would keep out of this because it's maintenance and your thing needs to live by itself as much as possible. The tree at the base seems great, has not been explored. And maybe, as Betsy was pointing out, maybe we could do this in phase 2, and we could plant the tree along that concrete walkway into the lawn that could create a promenade and could start creating a lawn that is softer, and you start hiding and making it softer while keeping your ridges. That's a big idea. Because remember, when you plant on a roof and you want things to grow, you need soil. And that's quite important. And I think you cannot forget that. I think the connection with the retail on the west side seems to be forgotten. I think it needs to be reinforced and clearer. To my opinion, with the $6 million budget that you have over-programmed the park. I think you need to allow flexibility for future use in the park in the future. I would sacrifice the waterfall for sure because it's costly, mechanical. You need a room for it. It needs to be maintained. Approval with waters and all this and hygiene and all this is very complicated. And I think maybe you keep your money for bigger buck return. That's my experience. The bathroom is too hidden. I believe if you have that, it should be something that people see without being the center of attention. But I think it needs to be a little bit more visible without having signage to go for it and know the end, as Jana was thinking. The lawn is great. Love it. We need one in Central Waterfront. Support it. I think in your drawing, page 54, you need to go do your homework and look at the park that has been happening on the Central Waterfront. There's a lot, right? Queensquay Boulevard, which is a linear park to my idea. The boardwalk all around the edge. Queensquay Terminal, Love Park, Jack's Layton Ferry Terminal, Canada Square. All of these I think we have a diversity. I don't agree when you say there's little botanical diversity. There is one. I think you need just to look more seriously into it. The planting strategy that you propose is great. Once again, with the multitude of planting that you're proposing, are you going to present also the type of soil that's going to support it? Because this is also cost. There is mention of street trees on the east side and the west side boundaries on Rees Street. Are the trees in Silvacel? My answer would say yes, because it's paved area. Maybe you put that in phase 2 in terms of keeping the zone clear for digging and waters and cities construction, and they would give you a little bit more buck in phase 1A and B. That would be my strategic on that. I just want to remind you that when we did the Holocaust Memorial in Ottawa, we had $7 million, lots of concrete. Have a look at it. I think it may help you to feel a bit better, but it's doable, but there was a lot of value engineering. So I think your battle is going to be value engineering throughout the process without losing the idea. You have a rich program, rich planting, rich diversity. Maybe you could simplify some of it, but making sure that you're not diluting the idea. So I think that would be my comment. Thank you very much and welcome again. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Claude. Okay, I think now we've heard from every member of the panel, so I'll provide an overview and a summary, and then we'll give a chance for the proponents to respond after. I think, and I'll try and summarize the themes here. Obviously, this is a special place and is a unique opportunity to create something that's quite different. The reference to the ridge and the bluffs, I think, has captured a lot of interest, and we want to make sure that those core features of the design concept are in fact realized. But I think you've heard from a number of people that it's a delicate strategy how to execute that vision. So there's a number of different areas suggested. One, and these are in no particular order, is to look at the stronger integration, I guess, of the ridge to the lawn. Suggestions made about possibly recalibrating the slope so the lawn is more integrated into the overall scheme. The comment, I think, was pretty obvious that there was some magic to the green wall in the composition scheme and a lot of sort of concern about the concrete wall and the amount of concrete being contemplated in this particular version, obviously related to the budgetary concerns that you've heard from many people. As an alternative to concrete, suggestions been made in terms of perhaps looking at investigating more natural features, stone, rock, etc., that in fact are more reminiscent of the bluffs as opposed to that concrete side facing the Gardner. As someone said, the Gardner has a lot of concrete already. You don't really want to add more. So another area for consideration. Some unease by several members about the phasing as it relates to the budget, but mainly concern about the stormwater shaft. And perhaps it might make more sense to have the stormwater shaft done first before phase one is implemented. I think that's a consideration to look at very carefully, and I think what people are saying in many ways is just take the time to do it right and make sure you achieve the overall vision and the core ideas, and that may be part of that consideration. There was a comment made about acoustics from the Gardner to try and deal with that to the best of your ability, but others have also said that it's not necessarily so bad. The Gardner's not going away, that one can still have sneaky or little snippets or views of the Gardner from the lawn and from Queens Quay, because it's obviously going to remain there. So I think there's a strategy there to figure out. In terms of the need to show sections and mock-ups, I think everyone was consistent with that, saying that would really, really help with more drawings as this evolves, so we can provide positive input and feedback and comment. There was a sense that that was lacking at this initial stage. And another important theme about continuity and linkages with the surroundings. And I think it's essential that the proponents get the latest drawings, the latest scheme of the Peter Street buildings and the Peter Street Basin, and that mid-block connection that I believe Bridget made reference to. There should be an ability for that to flow east-west from people from the basin through to this park and vice versa. Also, the relationship to HTO Park just across the street and the ability to obviously connect to that. And another important consideration is the Rees John Street Cultural Corridor. As was said in the presentation, that is one of the few north-south corridors that connects right from the Grange Art Gallery all the way down over top of the rail corridor and under the Gardner to the waterfront. So attention to that linkage, I think, is very, very important. Commentary made about the importance of right landscaping and planting on Queens Quay, and the accessibility, concern about the potential difference in the grade and the relationship to Queens Quay and the public sidewalk and the lawn, and a concern about fencing, whether that really is needed at all. Seasonality was another theme, very important. As we all know, 6 months of the year, it's pretty gray and drab, and ice and dirt and everything coming off the Gardner will fall onto this park, and I think that landscaping and the vegetation and the seasonality has to be given a lot of consideration. And I guess a final theme that several people expressed, given the reduced budget, there's a feeling that there are too many activities, perhaps trying to be accommodated in the park. And one member said perhaps over-programmed. Suggestion made about the waterfall being one that could perhaps be reduced or eliminated and save a lot of money. And obviously the amount of concrete that is proposed in this. Another comment made about the location of the basketball court, whether it was in the right place or not. A suggestion made that it could be moved and pulled further south and forward. And the final overall theme is we all want to see this special place created. To keep the clarity of the idea is going to be very challenging and very hard. And I think all the members of the panel have a lot of expertise that we would love to continue to offer as this scheme is evolved. So I hope that captures most of the commentary that panel members have made, and now have an opportunity for the proponents to respond. So Mark, I don't know if that's you or... or who?
Yeah, sure. No, I appreciate it. These are all really good comments. I think you've all nailed kind of the challenges and things we've been working through. I think, you know, during some of the questions, I think I was alluding to, we've been trying to strike that balance, and we will continue to really take a lot of these comments to heart, regarding specifically the ridge and, you know, what is the experience, what is the character, what is the scale, how does it, you know, achieve what we were set out to do during the competition, how does it get aligned to costs, and, you know, and also not just costs. I think in some ways we totally agree with some of the comments on the amount of concrete, or what the materiality is. I think in terms of program, it's a lot of great points in terms of, you know, what is necessary during the phases. How can we, you know, align some of that to more flexible relationships and stuff. And I think, you know, we'll continue to work with Waterfront Toronto and the city and Toronto Water on the significant challenges with the phasing. So, I'm encouraged by the comments and the suggestions. Honestly, I mean, we laugh every time we talk. We have internal meetings about the project. It's just like it's you know, we take on a lot of complex projects, but for a small urban park, this one's got everything. So.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think that concludes this item, and obviously there's no vote because it's issues ID. So thank you again, Mark, and all your colleagues. I think, Chris, it's back over to you for, we'll conclude this public session of the meeting.